I'm starting to worry about this black box of doom. Chapter 6. Malort. By the time the internet hive mind had deduced where the girl and the white SUV were headed, Malort was already in the Grand National and flogging it towards Barstow. He'd unlocked the phone's passcode on his second guess. Then he tapped the Find My app as he walked back to his car from his confrontation with the cranky lady at the gas station. The app immediately showed him a blue dot slowly crawling down I-40. It turned out Phil Green, or more likely his tech-savvy daughter, had done exactly what Malort had hoped. He'd thrown an AirTag into the box, one of those little coin-sized trackers that would report back to his phone. They were mostly used as anti-theft devices, so any man in the pro-theft side of the equation needed to be familiar with their workings. It would, in theory, continue to report back from anywhere on the planet, as the tag worked by pinging any phone that happened to be nearby. The dot was periodically blinking in and out, which told Malort that there were no devices in the vehicle, and that the tag was pinging fellow travelers as they passed. He'd suspected from the jump which city the box was destined for, but what the tracking confirmed was that the girl wasn't heading to an airport or bus station. She was driving the whole damned way. Thus, Malort was now going balls to the wall in a Buick grocery getter he just yesterday purchased from a tweaker who'd almost certainly already smoked away the proceeds. He'd anticipated and prepped for the trip earlier. Riding shotgun were a thermos full of coffee and a bag of Halloween-sized candy bars. His phone was packed to the brim with murder podcasts and Norwegian black metal that he intended to alternate based on his level of drowsiness. Yeah, the girl had a head start of a couple hours at least, but she wasn't moving fast, likely out of fear of attracting heat. He didn't know if she'd convinced the SUV's owner to sell her the vehicle or to drive her, but he figured it was best to assume 2 occupants and strategize accordingly. It was also best to assume they were both armed, which was definitely something to keep in mind for when Hammer finally met Anvil. He wondered if she, or her hypothetical co-pilot, had ever fired a shot in anger. Over the course of Malort's life, he'd fired 2 in anger, and several more out of boredom, and or good old-fashioned meanness. A different man, an unarmed man with working credit cards, would probably have just booked a flight and jumped ahead of them to spring the trap at the destination. Not only was that not an option for a man like Malort, or just Malort, since he thought he might be the only man exactly like him, but he strongly suspected the pair weren't going to make it to their destination one way or the other. Their operation didn't stink of competence, and he imagined taking the flight and then arriving to hear the navigator's driver had fallen asleep and run into a ditch in Turdberg, Oklahoma. No, Malort knew he had to do it the hard way, to follow and monitor for the inevitable fuck-up that slowed them down. It'd be a pain in the ass, literally, since decades on an impractically chopped bike had done a number on his lower back, and the Grand National seats weren't the cutting edge in ergonomic design. He was pissed at himself for letting the box get out of the city, but what was life but a series of hard jobs you had to endure because you'd screwed up the easy ones? Nah, who was he kidding? He wanted to be back out on the open road. It was his natural state. If he sat still for too long, he started to feel like fleas were crawling under his skin. It'd be the first time he'd done a road trip like this in years, and the first ever without the wind in his face. And, deep down, he strongly suspected that it would be his last. Zeke. "So, what's in the box?" asked Cammy from the sofa, her feet in a vibrating massage machine, her fingers frantically swiping through what was either the 2,000th level of some mobile game or a series of faces on a dating app. "Is it a nuclear bomb or something?" "Nobody knows," said Zeke, who was using a stylus and a drawing pad to paint the pink on a cartoon rabbit's vulva. "But they're taking it to Washington, D.C.? "We think so, yeah. And they wanted to get there by the holiday." "Looks like it." "Well, I hope your friend's okay. Somebody told the cops, right?" Zeke shrugged. "The feds know. They're in the subreddit." It had been Zeke who'd created the r/Abaddon's Navigator sub, anticipating that there would need to be a central hub for the obsessives, and that it would quickly turn into a witch hunt if not properly reined in. For example, Zeke had been careful when naming it, looking to keep the focus on finding Abbott and his vehicle rather than speculating about a suitcase nuke or whatever worst-case scenario would become the hive mind's fixation. Reddit had a bad track record with that sort of thing. After a bombing at the 2013 Boston Marathon, Reddit sleuths pieced together photos and other scraps of evidence to pin the attack on a man who not only wasn't involved, but who wasn't even alive at the time. Where are they now? I think the vehicle made it out of the city. The cops didn't do a roadblock or anything. It kind of seems like they don't care. At least not yet. And we still don't know who the woman is. Nope. Crazy. Do I need to get that blue tape for the walls? 4 cans of paint sat next to Zeke's desk, 2 white and 2 hot pink. Their plan was to alternate from wall to wall, the compromise they'd arrived at after being unable to agree on a single color. If you're skilled with the brush, he said, you don't need the tape. Well, I'm not skilled, and I'm the only one who'll have to do the high parts. You know they're going to be here on Saturday night, right? If they don't get stopped before then? Who is? Abaddon and the mystery woman. If I'm right about their route, they'll pass through Nashville on 40, which means they'll come within a couple miles of where we're sitting. Weird, replied Cammy, who was still swiping at her phone as if she were angrily knocking ants off the screen. I mean, it's not like we could do anything about it if they did. Zeke didn't reply. She was right, of course. Zeke imagined himself rolling his wheelchair out into the interstate to stop all incoming traffic, screaming Abbott's name. The cops would just pepper spray him and drag him off the street, thinking he was protesting climate change or one of the other several overlapping societal injustices that affected his life. But if this vehicle really was carrying a weapon of mass destruction to the nation's capital, well, they had to do something, right? Key. With the lethal purpose of a jungle predator on the hunt, Key burst through the door of her apartment, clearing off a spot on her kitchen counter for her purse and Glock, checked her phone for updates, then raced to the bathroom to vomit up the misguided burrito she'd eaten in the car. Then she raced to her sofa, cleared off a spot large enough that she could mostly lie down, then immediately went to sleep for over an hour. Then she burst awake, raged at herself for falling asleep, and checked her phone for updates. At breakfast, she'd asked her former FBI colleague, Patrick Diaz, to visualize her accumulated evidence on a corkboard full of photos connected with red yarn, and he made a snide remark about how those are only found in the homes of crazy people. The truth was, the only reason she didn't have red yarn on her board is that it had been immediately torn down by her cat, Ben, short for Benadryl, shortly before he'd run away and or got eaten by a coyote. She did have several articles she'd printed out still pinned there, but those had gone up before her printer broke. Well, it was broke in the sense that its built-in software decided that the mostly full ink cartridges were expired, which is how a printer company accosts you for all the money in your wallet. She decided she'd rather live a paperless life than give in, at which point she'd thrown the printer into the pool of her apartment complex. It was still in there the last time she'd looked. She paced around and tried to think. From another room, a smoke alarm chirped to warn of a low battery. The knowledge that a possible WMD was on its way to the capital, and there were zero reasonable actions she could take, was leaving her with a very familiar feeling. She'd spent her entire adult life having her ears blasted by a clarion cry repeated in 1,000 different forms, alternating the same 2 lines. Something must be done. Nothing can be done. Key had ended her FBI career shortly after reaching her lifelong goal of becoming a strategic analyst. The experts at the top who ostensibly examine big-picture threats and quietly save the USA behind the scenes. But nothing ruins your view of the world like getting your dream job. Key's tenure had been marred by turmoil, beginning with a mandate to summarize the threat from left-wing extremists, to which she had made the ill-advised comment, "You're worried about an uprising from a population that needs 4 different anti-anxiety prescriptions to order a pizza over the phone?" In the time since, she had developed a very specific theory about the potential for domestic terror in the USA spreading, not as a mass political movement, but as a social contagion. The country was full of isolated weirdos who were rapidly trying to find ways to make their lives meaningful, and, she believed, would eventually run out of options that didn't involve scattered corpses in a food court. Her views deviated sharply from the Bureau's, in that she believed all mass shootings were acts of terrorism, even if they didn't conform to the government's suffocatingly narrow definition of the term. They believed terrorism required a specific ideology, but these modern attacks were a grab bag of loosely held beliefs that secretly all pointed in the same direction: a desire to destroy the ability and willingness of individuals to gather in public and form communities. They were attacks on social cohesion, pushing a vision of the future that, in many cases, not even the attackers were aware of. She tried to call Patrick. It went to voicemail, because he was avoiding her, and he sucked. She cleared off a spot on her dining room table and sat down, trying to think. 1 minute later, Patrick called her back. She answered with, "And you thought I was being hysterical. Have they examined the residue on the pickup?" "Are you talking to me, or are you resuming a conversation you were having with someone else?" "What?" "You kind of just started in the middle there." "You and I both know what I'm talking about. The local cops handled that truck like it had been recovered from Pripyat." There was a strategic pause from Patrick's end before he said, "They were definitely overzealous. That's a visual I'd have preferred not to have out there. The men in spacesuits roping off the area and all that. I see the internet has already picked up the baton." "Yes, they've pieced together evidence that the device is on its way to Washington, D.C. There was another obnoxious silence from the other end before Patrick replied, "So we've jumped right to concluding there's a device. Have you been joining those online discussions, Joan?" "You know I used to monitor those channels. That was my specialty." "But it's not now." "No, I mean..." "Because that is literally not your job anymore. Do you want to come back? Is that what this is about? You know they'll take you. Manpower is low across the board, and most of the ones you clashed with took retirement right after you did." "Have they determined that the truck has been hauling nuclear material or not?" "Lots of harmless substances produce low levels of radiation, Joan. Fertilizer, kitty litter. They've collected samples. We'll know soon. Everyone gets a little too worked up when they hear the Geiger counter growl." Key pinched the bridge of her nose and visualized herself smashing a beer bottle over Patrick's head. "What about Phil Green?" "The cause of death is unclear, but they're not treating it as a homicide right now. There was a blunt trauma to the head, but it might have been due to a fall. The guy was trying to turn his whole farmhouse into a Faraday cage. I assumed to block the evil 5G signals he believed were stealing his thoughts. I guess there was a ladder right where he was discovered. It should be noted that he had a spouse who passed a few years ago." "I know. Opioid overdose. Or so they think." "Then he had a daughter who passed just earlier this year. Breast cancer. Are you getting regular exams for that? It can really sneak up on you. But you know, if you observed him behaving erratically, that could have been a trigger. Plus, like you said, he had his own diagnosis somewhere along the way." "Right, which could have removed fear of death or imprisonment from his calculus." "Or he may have indulged some fantasies and stopped there. This is all with JTTF now. They'll dig into it." To be fair to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, their job required them to sift through tips regarding supposed terror plots at the rate of several per hour. To be somewhat less fair, it really did appear to Key that their process was to randomly pick a group of dumbasses who'd spoken in public about blowing up a monument, assign a dozen undercover agents to carefully lead them from the idea stage to the execution stage, at which point they'd raid their trailer park and declare that they'd once again justified their budget. The smoke alarm chirped again. It had been doing it for several weeks. Or months. "And JTTF understands that the device in question is already probably out of the state?" Again, you keep saying device, as if everyone is in agreement that such a thing was not only planned, but designed, built, tested, and completed. But yes, by now, every police department in the nation has access to a description of the occupants and their vehicle. Hunter Coburn's Lincoln Navigator, you mean? Now, who is he? The owner of the vehicle transporting the box. Well, They're still tracking that down. The plates on the SUV were obscured in the security camera video. There was another vehicle parked in front of. We have the plate number. Who does? The world. Everyone. It's out there. On the internet, you mean? You say the internet like we're talking about a singular dumb entity who's always wrong. Everyone is online, including smart people with access to actual information. And they have photos of the vehicle from a Twitch broadcast by the driver, Abbott Coburn, Hunter Coburn's son, alias Abaddon, which, by the way, is one of the fucking angels of the apocalypse. Joan, if the internet knows, I'm sure JTTF knows. If they find a device in the vehicle, I'll make sure you get credit for the tip. But to be frank, I'm less worried about this potential domestic terror plot than I am about you. I remember you being extremely excited to move on to the next phase of your life. You mentioned at least 4 hobbies you were already buying the supplies for. This was true. But it turned out that Key's actual favorite hobby was buying supplies for hobbies. She didn't really get any joy out of the next part, and it was starting to get expensive. Her dining room table was, at the moment, piled high with calligraphy tools, including a $400 block of solid, handmade ink from Japan. Are they still processing Green's house and his bomb shelter? I assume they didn't find nuclear bomb prototypes, or you would have led the call with that. They found evidence of a very lonely, very paranoid man, whose home was robbed at some point after his death, maybe hours later. Have you been out there? To Phil Green's home? No, of course not. I'm not on this case. Are they still processing it? Joan, do not go out there. It's private property. It's a potential crime scene. I didn't say I was going to. You didn't have to. I know you. Photo. Is GSG a Russian saboteur who seduced Abbott into collaborating? Posted to r/Abaddon's Navigator by TruthLover420. I have found GSG in this photo from 8 years ago, depicting Russian youths posing with Vladimir Putin. She is the third one on the right. Look at the shape of the jawbone and ears. Since the Cold War, Russia has run schools designed to mimic American neighborhoods/cities in which operatives are immersed in the culture, not just learning perfect English, but how to adopt American mannerisms and habits. These operatives embed themselves in society, and then use one of 2 methods to turn citizens against their own country. Coercion, such as threats or extortion, or persuasion, deception, seduction, bribes. The latter is preferred. If you threaten a person into helping you, they will only go along until they can get to safety. If you persuade them, you have a loyal puppet for life. I have watched the Abaddon Goodbye video over 100 times, and I see no indication that he is being threatened with violence, held at gunpoint, etc. It is unlikely he was deceived, as he is literally traveling with an armored munitions crate that is openly labeled as radioactive. It seems even more implausible that Abbott would have gone along in exchange for money, considering he would not be likely to survive the planned attack. This tells me that Abbott/Abaddon is a willing collaborator who was possibly roped in via seduction. I have watched all of his previous videos and have never seen him mention having a girlfriend at any point in his life, so he would likely have found GSG's advances irresistible. In other words, if you think you are going to rescue Abbott, you should know that he likely does not want to be rescued. Post deleted by moderator Zeke Art. Please read, a reminder of what this subreddit is about. Posted to r/Abaddon's Navigator by Zeke Art, moderator. This sub is about tracking a vehicle to find a missing person. We're getting inundated with baseless conspiracy theories and trolls who are just creating noise for those of us who primarily want to find Abbott/Abaddon and get him home safely. Starting now, any posts making assertions about GSG or the nature of their trip must be accompanied by some kind of actual evidence. The speculation some of you are posting sounds like little more than fan fiction at this point. Furthermore, if GSG is in fact part of some kind of terror plot, then Abbott is a victim. Going forward, any post that implies Abbott is a part of the plot or otherwise accuses him of being a collaborator in a terror attack will be deleted and the user will be banned. Abbott is my friend, and some of you are treating this like entertainment. If reality isn't enough to keep you interested, and you find yourself constantly inventing a fake reality for yourself, you need to rethink your life. Thank you. Chapter 7. Abbott. This might seem like a personal question, said Ether, but do you ever just spiral into an all-day masturbation frenzy? Once again, Abbott had to take a moment to process the question before answering. Outside, the sun-blasted Arizona hellscape scrolled by. Air-fried dirt surrounding withered creosote shrubs, clinging to their thirsty, miserable lives. They'd done another bathroom break at a rest stop at the state border, Ether noting a blue warning sign near the door proclaiming poisonous snakes and insects inhabit the area, which had annoyed both of them. A creature with a toxic bite is venomous, not poisonous. The latter implies they'd be harmful to eat. Ether clarified. On the Adderall, I mean. I had a friend who told me he'd had these hours-long jerk sessions until they lowered the dosage. See, you keep criticizing my interpersonal skills, but you just have no sense of boundaries at all, do you? Sorry, you're right. Forget I asked. The last people I lived with, they had this policy of being, well, extremely blunt about things. They'd be like, did that stew we had yesterday give anybody else the shits? It was kind of cool because, like I said, I was never great at figuring out those rules anyway. What you're not supposed to talk about. After a bit, Abbott said, I've had Adderall do the opposite, more often than not. My other prescription, the one I have to get filled, is even worse. At this point, I think my meds' side effects should qualify as a disease all on their own. But if I don't take them, it feels like there's a shrieking car alarm going off right next to my ears 24 hours a day. I mean, it's no surprise there's a pill shortage. That's what happens when you build a society that can only be survived if you either have a super specific type of brain or a prescription to block out the chaos. Do I need to do anything up there or just keep going straight? He nodded toward signs announcing they were approaching Flagstaff. Keep going straight. The road will change names. It'll become Purple Heart Trail, but don't be alarmed. It'll change back in a few miles. I heard a stat that almost 1 in 10 men are on antidepressants now, and almost 1 in 5 women, which was shocking because it's so low. I know, right? I don't have any friends who aren't on antidepressants, or an antipsychotic, or something. I was like, where is this well-adjusted majority? They're getting dopamine highs from betting on sports games on their phone, or jerking it to porn 5 times a day. Just trying to squeeze some feel-good chemicals from their brain, somehow. I mean, that's the best-case scenario. Otherwise, they're drinking themselves to death, or they're on painkillers, or worse. I had a family friend pass from an opioid overdose a few years ago. Might have been intentional. 3 of my high school classmates are already dead. 1 drunk driving, 1 suicide, 1 was drunk or high on a hike and fell and drowned. It was like 6 inches of water, just enough to cover his nose and mouth. Abbott grunted. I can probably beat that, but I stopped keeping track a long time ago. My old Florida classmates drop off social media, and maybe they reemerge a year later posting pics of their ankle monitor. Or they don't reemerge at all. They're dead, or among the walking dead, shuffling around under a bridge somewhere. I think they said over 100,000 people died from overdoses last year alone. Opioids, meth, almost 50,000 suicides. Though, like I said, I suspect some of those overdoses were also on purpose. More than that, drank themselves to death. All of those numbers are skyrocketing. I think suicides are up like 30% just since the year 2000. Oh, this is interesting. That exit up there splits off to the old Route 66. You can actually see the difference in how they did the highways. If you were to take that exit, you'd go right into the heart of Flagstaff. A bunch of the old roadside attractions are still there. But if we stay on 40, we'll sail right past it. If you weren't paying close attention, you'd barely notice. Am I taking the exit? Do you need to stop? No. You don't want to pass through? See what Flagstaff has to offer? It could be your last chance. I'm going to guess it looks like every small city I've ever driven through. There'll be a Walmart, and probably a Target off the next exit. There'll probably be a La Quinta and a Marriott right around the highway. next to a Chili's and Olive Garden and Taco Bell. The houses and apartment buildings will look the same as they're gonna look in New Mexico and Texas and Oklahoma. Every town will have a few buildings that are a little different or old, so the locals think their city has character. But all the rest is the same shit. Mass-produced. Copy-paste. The buildings might be, but not the people. Nah, the people too. We should stop and get gas, though. And I'll force out a pee. If we do it right, we can keep going straight through to Albuquerque. There'll be an exit on your right. Where exactly are we stopping? Guess. What do you mean, guess? We're going to Circle K, baby. Tanisha. 22-year-old Tanisha Clark was not a true crime enthusiast, and definitely hadn't been following the internet investigation into the mysterious white SUV and its ominous cargo. She had, however, noticed Circle K trending on Twitter earlier, and had clicked on it because she worked at a Circle K, and was, of course, curious to know what terrible news had caused the company to trend. Was there a mass shooting in a store? Had the CEO said something offensive? Were layoffs coming? Or, even worse, were folks doing some trending viral stunt that would leave the store a mess? She remembered hearing a thing about teenage boys smashing gallons of milk on the floor for clout. Even after browsing for several minutes over her lunch break, Tanika had no idea what the man and woman being discussed had supposedly done, and it was incredibly hard to sort through the nonsense. There was something about a bomb and an Uber driver, and a woman wearing green sunglasses, and maybe they're Russians? Either way, the company was only trending because that's where the culprits had stolen a vehicle, or something. It didn't seem like they were targeting Circle K stores or anything like that, and details seemed awfully muddy, so she had kind of forgotten about it by the middle of the afternoon. At which point, the door chimed, and in walked a pasty white man whose appearance was utterly unremarkable, after having put gas in a white land yacht that would also have been unremarkable had it not tickled something in the back of Tanisha's brain. Then she noticed the man was followed in by a girl who was conspicuously trying to hide her face from the store cameras with a baseball cap and bright green sunglasses. Tanisha stared, then forced herself not to stare. It was stupid to think it was the same couple. Those people were in California, weren't they? And what was she even supposed to do? There was a procedure for how to react when robbed, but not for whatever this was. Were they fugitives? Terrorists? A totally unrelated couple who happened to own the same color car and sunglasses? If it really was them, would they freak out and shoot up the store if they thought they'd been spotted? She badly wanted to pull out her phone and bring up the pic of the guy. The internet had dug up his social media. But what if he spotted her doing it? Would he kill her? Could she die right now? She looked around for her manager, Linda, wondering how she would even explain the situation. She continued to not look at the couple, then very clearly heard the guy complain that he'd been driving for almost 7 hours. She quietly did the math, and then, almost like a premonition, Tanisha imagined her own name trending on Twitter that night, with friends offering thoughts and prayers to her family. Abbott. "I've got to say," said Abbott as he browsed miniature liquid caffeine capsules, "I don't see how I make it to Albuquerque tonight. My body's battery is showing that last sliver of red." "You've just been sitting in a moving chair this whole time." "Do you want to drive?" "I'm not criticizing, I'm making a point. I don't think you're exhausted because of the driving. I think you're mentally exhausted from riding with me." "That is, not the shocking revelation you think it is." No, listen. I think you find it draining to deal with anyone face to face, and I think it's specifically because you can't control it. Online, you can duck out of any conversation. You can say anything you want. You can calibrate how you come across. Not here. The ability to block people yelling death threats and making racist jokes is a net positive in my mind. Sure, but I think our interactions could be totally great the whole time, and you'd find it just as exhausting because the world has trained you to be afraid of being fully and truly perceived. We evolved in tribes where everybody could see everybody else all the time. We didn't even have separate rooms or beds. Just by evolution, you should find personal contact comforting. And the fact that they've burned that out of so many of us is apocalyptic. Hey, they have souvenirs over there if you want to remember this special time we had together in Flagstaff. I'm good. Abbott glanced over at the register and caught the cashier looking back at him. She quickly looked away, like a teacher had just called her out for cheating on a test. Then Abbott quickly looked away, like it was a contest to see who could be most embarrassed by the accidental eye contact. Abbott's understanding of social interactions always ran on a delay, ranging from a few seconds to several years. So it took a moment to realize that her reaction implied that she recognized him. Was she a fan of his streams? "You know what we're missing?" said Ether, in a conversation Abbott had already checked out of. "Is gathering places. All those people killing themselves by various means, fast and slow. I'm telling you, part of that is that we just don't gather anymore. We've stopped going to church. We build suburbs where people don't have that third place that isn't work or home, where everybody can go hang out. You can't do that at a chain restaurant. They want you out of there so they can seat the next customer. Young people don't go to bars or clubs like they used to. But in general, there's just no profit in providing a public place where we can all just go and be together. All the money is in, I don't know, getting us addicted to some piece of software. You talked about people gambling on their phones. Think how sad that is, going broke from blackjack from your sofa without even a cheap casino buffet to cushion the blow." "Come on, let's go." Abbott didn't know if he really had an antenna for danger, considering his anxiety was smashing that button 24 hours a day. But he definitely wanted out of this place. He surreptitiously peeled a few bills off his wad of cash so he wouldn't have to do it in front of the staff and make them think he was a drug dealer. Before coming inside, he put a couple $1,000s in his pocket and stuffed the rest into his bag. But it still felt illicit. He told himself not to look over at the counter again, but for some reason his brain interpreted it as a command to do exactly that. And this time when he looked, he swore the girl was snapping a picture of him with her phone. "I heard that the average number of close friends has dropped over the last 30 years, said Ether. "It used to be that the number of loners who literally had no friends was tiny, like 3% of the population. That's quadrupled since then. Now, 12% of us have nobody. Today, you're almost as likely to be totally alone as you are to have a big squad of friends like teenagers have in the movies. I'm telling you, it's a crisis. Humans need friends every bit as much as we need food. But because this kind of starvation is invisible, and because we're all physically really fat, nobody sees it. Then, every 10 minutes or so, somebody sticks a gun in their mouth." They had arrived at the register just in time for the cashier to hear "gun in their mouth" as the last words in the conversation. Abbott paid while the cashier acted like eye contact would turn her to stone. As soon as they were back outside, Abbott muttered, "Hey, is there any chance that girl at the counter—" Ether didn't hear, as she was rushing off across the parking lot. There was a minivan parked over there, and sitting in the open side door was a middle-aged woman who was crying her eyes out. Another woman of the same age was standing over her, trying to console her. "What's happened?" asked Ether, before Abbott could stop her. Tanisha. After several minutes of searching, Tanisha found what seemed like a good place to ask about the fugitive couple, a section of angry nerd internet specifically devoted to cracking the case. She had to create a Reddit account to post the photo she'd secretly snapped of the pair, adding a second pic she'd taken just moments ago of their fancy SUV. She waited, refreshed, then was flattened by the ferocity of the response. The commenters acted like she just captured the second coming of Jesus Christ on film. She was inundated with questions, accusations of having faked it, and criticism that she hadn't taken some kind of action to keep the couple from leaving the store. Within 6 minutes of the post, a reply told her that if a bomb detonated in Washington, every drop of blood would be on her hands. She quickly swiped off the page and busied herself with work. She watched to see if she could at least take note of when the SUV pulled away and which direction it went, but it was still out there, parked at the first pump. If they were fugitives, they seemed to have no concern at all about getting caught, as they were now off chatting with some strangers, or accomplices, parked at the edge of the lot. Malort. There was no air conditioning in the Grand National, and between the heat and the tedium, Malort had found himself steadily losing hope with every mile of slab that passed under his wheels. The tracker had been pinging with some regularity, as these guys were seemingly stopping at every establishment that had a restroom, which always put them in proximity to other phones. Even so, he wasn't closing the distance as quickly as he'd have liked. He'd been occupying his mind trying to figure out how much faster than the navigator he'd have to be traveling to catch it, but it got into some deep algebra bullshit, and numbers had always pissed him off. But now, the marker had parked itself at a gas station in Flagstaff, and stayed there, longer than their previous stops, the longest they'd been stationary since they'd set out. Maybe they'd stopped to have a sit-down meal, secure in their belief that they'd left SoCal without pursuit. Or maybe they were doing something stupid, like trying to rob the place because they were already out of cash. Or, worst of all, maybe they'd found the tracker and tossed it in a ditch. Malort was still almost an hour away, so no scenario seemed particularly hopeful. Still, he strapped in and threw the coals to the Buick because, who knows, right? Maybe he was due for a break for the first time in his goddamned life. Photo. Is this them? Posted to r/Abaddon's Navigator by Anonymous in AZ. I took these a few minutes ago. I'm in Flagstaff, AZ. Comments. Not Busey. I don't understand. Why aren't the cops swarming that place? There should be SWAT teams there. Callie Son. I tried calling them. Not Busey. Calling who? Callie Son. Flagstaff PD. I told them I wished to remain anonymous, but that there was a Russian operative transporting a nuclear device, and that they were currently at that Circle K. Not Busey. Guys, do not do that. This is what makes them write us off as a bunch of kids. They'll think it's a meme. Osborne again. Why do people keep calling them Russians? I'm apparently out of the loop. Zeke Art. Ignore it. Some morons in the comments have started claiming CSG is a Russian operative based on nothing whatsoever. Lyota-chan. It's not based on nothing. Watch this video. Link. Osborne again. I'm not watching a 46-minute vlog from a conspiracy nut. Punisher09. Guys, I'm in Flagstaff. I live on the other side of town, but I'm heading out now. Zeke Art. To do what, exactly? Punisher09. I have an AR-15. If the police won't do anything about this, I will. Zeke Art. Tell me this is a joke. Not Busey. No, do not do that either. Stone Stalin. He's lying, LOL. Osborne again. This is going to be a disaster. Not Busey. You are going to get killed. Abbott. Ether and Abbott were, at the moment, listening to an interminably long story that a sobbing woman was telling in the wrong order, with the only important information saved for the very end. When Ether had rushed over to the woman and her partner, Abbott had assumed there was some kind of medical emergency that he was wholly unequipped to address. It turned out to be a completely different crisis that he was even more unequipped to address. The crux of the story was that the two women had lost their pet bunny. Prior to conveying this, the crying woman had explained that they were on a trip from Phoenix up to the Grand Canyon, that they made this trip every year, or at least they used to, but stopped during the pandemic. Not because there was anything dangerous about visiting a massive open-air canyon during a pandemic, of course, but because it would also have required stopping at numerous facilities without proper air filtration and sanitation. And Lupita had an autoimmune disorder, and the bunny was getting older, and they had wanted to show him more of the world, because rabbits don't live very long, though they do, as she explained at some length, live longer in captivity than in the wild. Its name was Petey. I'm sure it'll come back, mumbled Abbott, glancing back at the Navigator, which was still parked at the gas pump and probably blocking some other customer who was growing steadily more enraged by the second. He's going blind, said the crying woman's partner, whose name was Lupita, if he was keeping track of the story correctly. We took him out of his carrier to give him some water, but he got startled by a noise and took off like a shot, and now he's all alone out there. He's never been out in the world by himself. This is all alien to him. He must be scared to death." Ether looked out over the landscape. On two adjacent sides of the gas station were multiple lanes of busy roadway. On the other two sides were a small patch of trees and a housing development. In between those homes were shrubs, parked cars, air conditioning units, and an infinity of other tiny nooks and crannies the creature could wedge itself under or into. Abbott couldn't decide which of those options was more hopeless, in terms of the women finding their bunny alive. It was surely lost forever, even if it hadn't already been run over and or eaten by a dog or feral Arizonan. "Did you see which direction it went?" asked Ether, for reasons Abbott couldn't fully comprehend. "Toward the houses, I think," said the sobbing woman. "But he's so fast. He's just a streak when he takes off. And he's gray. He blends in. Even if he was right over there, he'd be hard to see. We looked and we tried to shake his treats, but he was just gone. It was like he disappeared. His eyes are bad. He can see us if we get close, but he gets so scared because he can't see what's coming. They're such nervous animals." "Okay, see if you can find it over there," said Ether, and Abbott was astonished to find she was saying it to him. "I'll move the navigator so it's not blocking the pumps." "What? I thought you couldn't drive." "I didn't say I couldn't drive. I said I didn't want to get caught driving without a license. I'll just pull it out of the way." "Bless you," said the crying woman. I have his treats here. If you can get close enough to entice him, open the bag and shake them around. If you can hear them, he can hear them if you get close enough."
Well,"
muttered Abbott, as he warily surveyed the vast stretch of treacherous landscape.
I mean, okay. What is his name again?
"Dump truck," said the crying woman. "Petey," said the other woman, Lapita. "We each have our own name for him, but he doesn't come when called. Rabbits don't do that."
"Okay," said Abbott. "If I find him, do I just pick him up?"
"He probably won't let you. Try, but don't force it. If you pick him up wrong, he'll panic. Bunnies can kill themselves if they get too scared. They'll kick so hard that it breaks their spine. He'll also probably try to bite you. Here's what he looks like." She pulled out her phone to show him a picture, apparently afraid Abbott would accidentally snatch up a wild rabbit and bring it back instead. It was gray, with floppy ears, and, from the photo, it was clear they'd given it an entire bedroom in their home, complete with miniature rabbit furniture. Abbott shuffled away, knowing that once he was on private property, he was a prime candidate to get shot by a paranoid homeowner. This kind of thing, he thought, is why you don't leave the house. Photo. Is this them? Posted to r/Abaddon's Navigator by Anonymous in AZ. Comments. Not Busey. Why can't somebody just block them in the parking lot so they can't leave? Punisher 09. Are they still there? I'm on my way. Not Busey. Turn around and go home. Osborne again. The source hasn't posted anymore, so we don't know. They're probably gone. It's been a while. Punisher 09. I'm not far away now. Zeke Art. Hopefully the police get there before this idiot. Callie Son. Well, the cop I talked to on the phone threatened to have me arrested if I didn't stop calling. I was like, I'm in the UK. Good luck arresting me. Not Busey. I'm sure the Flagstaff PD is thrilled to be getting calls from the other side of the planet about something they saw on Reddit. Punisher 09. Hopefully the cops won't be there. I'm not supposed to be driving. Abbott. Over and over again, Abbott told Lapita they should split up to cover more ground. She instead insisted on following behind him, relaying her life story as they went. Apparently, they'd gotten the bunny because the other woman is allergic to cats. He is very particular about what kind of kale they put in his dish, and throws the dish across the floor if he's displeased with its contents. He uses his mouth to toss things. His arms are too tiny. We have to find him, she said. We have to. Thank you so much for doing this. We can't leave here without him. I don't know what we'll do. We can't leave here. They were wandering between the houses, Abbott trying to peer behind obstacles in a way that wouldn't make any witnesses think he was planning to cut the catalytic converter off their cars. They weren't able to check even 1% of the potential bunny hiding spots. The whole process was cruel in its futility. He was hoping if he somehow miraculously stumbled across Petey dump truck that the bunny would take off running. Then he'd at least see the motion. But mostly he just wanted to do enough searching that this woman would agree it was pointless and release Abbott from the obligation. He had so much driving to do. If they didn't make their miles today, it would mean a longer day tomorrow, and the next. "He doesn't know how to survive out here," said Lapita, rebutting a sentiment Abbott had in no way expressed out loud. When they'd met, Ether had joked/claimed that she could read Abbott's thoughts, and she probably could, because everyone could. Teachers knew when he was lying, guys knew when he was scared, girls knew when he was indulging lecherous fantasies. It had always made him feel like everyone else had a sense organ he was lacking, because it never went the other way. He could never sense when someone else was being disingenuous or stringing him along so they could mock him later. Of course he hated socializing. That information imbalance was terrifying. "We're his whole world," said Lapita, continuing her argument with Abbott's unspoken thoughts. "We can't leave him. Can you imagine him out here, waiting for us to get him, and we just never come? Then it gets dark, and he doesn't understand why we abandoned him, what he did wrong. I just imagine his little heart breaking, wondering why we didn't try harder. No, we can't leave. If we don't find him before it gets dark, we'll sleep in the van and keep looking tomorrow. And the next day, I won't abandon my baby." Abbott hated this woman. He hated how needy she was, hated how she was putting all of this on him, loading him down with her desperation, demanding he take on the burden of this helpless animal's fear, as if he didn't already have enough on his shoulders to bend his bones. The sun was in his eyes, and he wondered how many venomous snakes were out here, waiting to latch onto his bare ankles. They trudged down one row of homes, then back down another, then a third, knowing that at any point the bunny could move undetected to a location they'd previously checked. Ether had commented on how the day wasn't as blisteringly hot as expected, but Abbott was definitely sweating now. 10 minutes turned to 20, then 30. The whole time, he could sense the woman's growing panic behind him as it became more and more obvious she was never going to see the bunny again. Hell, the animal probably escaped to get away from these two weirdos who decided he was their child. Abbott was now just making cursory attempts to search, devoting his thoughts to rehearsing his exit strategy. He could say something about how it was all for the best, that maybe some kind-hearted family would take the bunny in. Either way, it absolutely was not Abbott's problem. And now the woman behind him was crying, and he wanted to be anywhere else but here. Anywhere on Earth. Tanisha. It had been almost an hour since the white SUV had shown up, and Tanisha was now strongly considering quitting her job. First, the phone had run in the back, and she'd heard the confused voice of her manager, who didn't seem to understand what the caller was asking for. Then, a few minutes later, the phone had run again. And again. She'd then heard Linda say Tanisha's name as if the callers were asking for her. A frantic check online revealed that the photo she'd posted, along with the name of the city, was all it had taken for the internet to pin down her exact location. Apparently, the store's logo was visible in the corner of one of her pics. And then, somehow, they dug up Tanisha's name and her social media. Now they were calling, demanding she stop the fugitive couple, insisting she be personally held to account for the failure to detain them. Linda had then taken her into the back, the confused old woman accusing her of filming some kind of viral stunt for social media that was now attracting unwanted attention. Tanisha tried to explain, at which point her manager had demanded that Tanisha do the one thing she had absolutely not wanted to do, which was call the police. She reluctantly did that, only to find herself on hold for a shockingly long time. What if she was in mortal danger? Before speaking to an officer who seemed very annoyed. It was clear she was not the first to call about what the man referred to as this internet rumor. He asked her if she had been the victim of a crime. Not today, no. And if she knew what crime the couple in the white SUV had committed. She had to admit she wasn't totally sure. And if the vehicle was still there. It was, the last time she looked. By the time she got off the phone, her nerves were so fried that she begged her manager to let her go home sick. A request that was answered with a speech about how they were short-handed and how the whole world would fall apart if she didn't remain until the shift changed. Tanisha agreed because she didn't have the energy to argue and tried to get back into the routine by cleaning up a situation on the coffee counter. Apparently, a customer got confused while trying to match drink lids to cup sizes, and then threw a lid-flinging tantrum in response. That's when the biggest, most terrifying man she'd ever seen came striding through the door. He was bald and covered in tattoos, including one on his throat that looked like a sword or something. He sauntered up to the register, passing behind Tanisha as she tried to fix the lid disaster with trembling fingers. Linda was at the counter and greeted him as he approached. The guy took off his mirrored sunglasses, put both hands on the counter, and said, "I'm looking for a woman in a white SUV. She was just here a few minutes ago, possibly with another person. She stole something from me, and I'm good and pissed off about it. So, if you're thinking of lying to me just because you don't like how I look, well, let's just say I'd advise you otherwise." While Linda was struggling to come up with a reply, Tanisha quietly slipped out of the front door, ran to her car, and started it, planning to drive home and never come back. Then she thought about Linda, trapped in there with a terrifying man, and felt guilty for leaving her behind. She got back out of the car at the exact moment a kid crept by at 10 miles an hour in an open-top Jeep, staring down the place like he was confirming his target before a drive-by. The doorless vehicle gave her a clear view of the interior, and, as he passed, Tanisha swore she saw a machine gun in the passenger seat. Abbott. It felt like they had been at the futile bunny search for at least an hour. Abbott had no idea how long it actually was. He didn't wear a watch, and of course he did not have his phone. By this point, he had muttered something to the effect of, "We really do have to get back on the road," several times, but Lupita was always ready with some reply. "I don't think he'd stray far," she'd say. "He would try to find some place to hide." Abbott had gotten down on his hands and knees probably 50 times to look under various parked cars and other obstacles. At one point, he'd felt a flicker of hope when he spotted a ball of gray fur that then turned out to be a cat. Nope, he was done. He brushed dirt off his knees, stretched his back. "All right, we do have to go. We're on a schedule. I hope you guys find..." A dog started barking its head off a couple of houses away, and Lupita went jogging off in that direction, as if that were a sound a bunny could make. Abbott considered taking this opportunity to head back to the Circle K, but found himself following her. Once he arrived on the scene, he realized she deduced that the dog could be barking at a rabbit, as if dogs didn't constantly just find reasons to bark regardless. There, they found what was either a pit bull or a similarly terrifying breed snarling at a parked golf cart. A wiry guy in a tank top came wandering over, yelling at the dog to shut up. Its name was apparently Omar, and it clearly did not feel any obligation to obey its owner's commands. "Hey!" yelled the wiry guy. "Hey, what are you barking at? Hey, Omar, act like you got some sense." Abbott tried to get low to see under the golf cart. Maybe there was something under there. It was hard to say. It was all shadows. And then, it all happened at once. A gray blur zipped out from under the golf cart. The dog lunged at it. The blur smacked into a wooden fence and resolved itself into a scrambling, frantic bunny rabbit. Lupita screamed, "No!" as the dog went in with its jaws. Photos. Is this them? Posted to r/Abaddon's Navigator by Anonymous in AZ. Comments. Punisher09. I've parked on the block. I'm going live on FB. Here. Link. Not Busey. Oh my god. Zeke Art. Please tell me this is just a troll. I want to ban him, but he's literally talking about killing my friend. WTF. Leota-chan, what exactly is it you think you're going to do, if you're really there? If GSG is a Russian agent, she'll know how to shoot you dead. Punisher09, I'll have a range advantage. Osborne again. Holy shit, this is real. I am watching this idiot get out of his car on the FB stream, and he absolutely has an AR. Stone Stalin, dude, how old are you? Zeke Art, I can't watch this. I'm having a fucking panic attack. Abbott. The man in the tank top possessed dog-snatching reflexes that strongly implied he'd had a great deal of practice snatching this and other similar animals. He'd vaulted to the spot and in one smooth motion got the pit bull's collar in his fist, yanking the beast sideways, not backward, denying it the kind of tug-of-war that its physiology was designed to both win and enjoy. Abbott thought the rabbit was already dead in its jaws, but it had somehow twisted itself free, landing awkwardly and then streaking off along the fence before squeezing under a gap and zipping away. It was astonishingly fast, taking off across a parking lot, then a road, into an expanse of shrubs and trees next to the highway. This meant Lupita had about 2 seconds to be relieved that the dog hadn't broken the bunny's neck before she saw her baby vanish into the distance. She fell to her knees, muttering, "Oh no, oh no, oh my God, he's gone." The guy in the tank top was admonishing his dog, which just looked confused. Wasn't that what he'd been built for? Why else did he have those muscles, those teeth, the rush of ecstasy from the scent of panicking meat? Lupita sat there in the dirt, clearly trying to figure out how she would break the news to her partner back in the minivan. How long had they been planning this vacation? Wondered Abbott. How had they pictured it in their heads? Now this would forever be nothing but the awful, cursed road trip where they lost poor Petey. That's life, though. You plan, and then... "I just let my guard down for 1 second," she whispered. "We let him out of his carrier to get water. Otherwise, it spills everywhere. And we had the door open because he'd kicked some hay onto the floorboard, and we were cleaning it, and there was a noise, just somebody slamming their hood, I think, and he got startled, and then he was just... gone. He depended on us for everything. He trusted us to keep him safe, and we couldn't even do that. Giving an animal a good life, that's sacred. Do you understand that? It's one of the purest things you can do, to protect them from this, all this. I mean, we knew he wouldn't live forever, but it was our job to be there at the end for him, to give him comfort when he couldn't see or hear anymore, to hold him as he passed, to bury him." They stood there in silence. The woman, Abbott, the guy with his panting dog. Abbott met her eyes, feeling the sun and the lost time and the despair beating down on him. Then he heard himself say, "Give me the bunny treats. I'll get him back." And then he walked the direction the rabbit had fled, his feet already hurting, crossing the parking lot, and then waiting to cross the street, scanning the pavement for a tiny, flattened, twitching carcass. He heard footsteps trailing behind him, and he expected to find Lupita back there, but instead, it was the wiry guy in the tank top. "I put Omar away," he said. "You ever picked up a rabbit before?" "No." "My cousin is a magician in Puerto Rico," he said as they crossed the street. "There's a technique. Get it to trust you with the treats. Let it see you coming. Move slow as you can. Stroke his back. See if he'll let you. Then get around so he's facing away from you. Put one hand on his butt. Then, with your other hand, lift him up by his armpit so he's facing away from you. Like this. Like you're showing him to somebody. You watching?" He pantomimed the movement. "You'll kind of curl him up. His legs will be pointing straight out. This way, he can't try to kick his way free. Then, tuck his face into your elbow. He'll relax if you can cover his eyes. If you can shield the world from him, he'll trust you." "That's if we find him at all." "Oh, we ain't gonna quit until we find him." "If he's made it into those trees, I don't see how we will." "It's better he goes toward the trees than the 4 lanes of highway where everybody's doing 80. The surrounding landscape was, in fact, alternating patches of trees and roadways, of bunny invisibility and bunny death. Abbott was just beginning to rehearse how he would break the bad news to Lapita after his bold proclamation earlier, when Tank Top casually said, "That him?" He was pointing at an arrangement of large decorative stones around a drainage gate, and Abbott assumed the man had mistaken one of the rocks for the bunny. They approached slowly, and then Abbott stopped breathing. There was Petey Dump Truck, huddled in the shadows of the stones, trying to make himself as small as possible against this impossibly huge, terrifying world. He was close enough to the highway that he could surely hear the cars whooshing by, even if he couldn't see them, and he had to know that they meant death, that out here, everything did. Malort. He was hurrying to the Grand National when a woman screamed from somewhere nearby. Malort reflexively assumed she was reacting to the sight of him, as that was definitely a noise people sometimes made when he appeared in their field of vision. He turned in that direction and found she was wearing a Circle K employee uniform. She had her back to him and was reacting to the scariest sight Malort had ever beheld. A literal child was walking that direction, wearing a tactical vest and carrying an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle. It's true that everybody looks younger now. A soft world is easier on the skin. But the gunman couldn't have been older than 15. Damn it, thought Malort. This is what happens when you start posting cops in the schools. The kids just take their school shootings outside. The kid was shouting something. Malort couldn't make it out, but doubted it would be informative if he could. He got low and circled around to the driver's side of the Buick, putting the car between him and the gunman. He opened the door and reached in for the sawed-off double-barrel shotgun he kept there as a carjacking deterrent, or facilitator, should he need to do the carjacking. He checked to confirm it was loaded. He didn't particularly want to blow a child in half today, but the kid was old enough to pull the trigger on high-velocity rounds that wouldn't so much drill holes in a body as shred it from the inside, and Malort was definitely not in the mood for that. He edged around, eyeing the kid, who, judging from his manner, seemed to have no idea what to do next. He wasn't sure if that uncertainty was reassuring or terrifying, but was leaning toward the latter. Abbott. A girl had screamed somewhere in the distance, probably some teenagers screwing around. Abbott flinched and froze, hoping it wasn't enough to startle the bunny. It didn't move. He opened the bag of treats, some kind of fruity little candy things. He took slow, quiet steps. "Can you pick him up?" Abbott asked Tank Top. "I smell like dog. He'll panic. If he starts kicking, try to hold him close to your body. I know what they said about kicking himself to death, but you gotta hang on no matter what. If he gets away, that'll be that." Abbott crept closer. Petey was maybe 15 feet away now. Then 10. He shook the bag and held some treats in his other hand. The bunny perked up, though he didn't know if he was interested in the scent of food or preparing a bolt. Abbott edged close enough that he could have lunged forward and snatched at the rabbit, but these things had evolved to evade predators much faster than humans, killers that could bite in a blink. He set a treat on the ground in front of the rabbit, and it stretched out to sniff it. Abbott held his breath. He slowly put a hand on its back, and it allowed him. This was a pet, not a wild animal. It was used to people and being picked up. This was doable. He came around so that the rabbit was facing away from him. It was pointed toward the highway, so would likely take off right into traffic if startled. He slid a hand under it, put the other on its rump, and lifted. It thrashed out of his grip, and, suddenly, he was holding air. The bunny took off, doing exactly what Abbott had feared it would do, heading right for the whipping blur of interstate traffic, where it was quickly intercepted by Lapita, who expertly snatched him up, pulled him close, and stuffed his face into her elbow. "I got you," she gasped. "I got you. Oh, my baby boy. I got you." She pressed her face into his furry back, and her whole body hitched with sobs. Boom! said Tank Top from behind him. Got him. He slapped Abbott on the back. That would have haunted me all month. God damn. Lupita headed back the way they'd come. But when she reached the side street, the minivan rolled up, the other woman at the wheel. She exited with a rhinestone-encrusted animal carrier and held it open while dump truck was stuffed inside. Did you have an adventure? Said the tearful woman to the bunny as it settled in. Did you meet some friends? The women were then profusely thanking Abbott and the other guy, offering payment that they both declined. Then they drove off to continue their Grand Canyon vacation, and Tank Top shook hands and said goodbye. It had been, Abbott thought, maybe, the best few minutes of his life. Malort. Well, the good news was the school shooter didn't seem eager to shoot Malort. He was peering around the bumper of the Grand National with the shotgun hidden out of view, now wondering if he could just dive into the Buick and drive away. Would the kid pepper the car with bullets? Maybe he should try to run him over on his way out, just as a good deed. Nah, he could see that resulting in a call to the cops, and the Buick wasn't exactly hard to spot if they put out a bolo. Someone inside the store was yelling about calling the police. The school shooter was still saying something, seeming to tell everyone to calm down, asking questions Malort couldn't understand. Malort leaned around his bumper and yelled, Who are you here to shoot, kid? Is it somebody specific, or is this a mass shooting scenario? The kid looked more confused than ever, then said, Where's the navigator? Abbott. He jogged back toward the Circle K, eager to get rolling, his drowsiness having evaporated. They could still make it to Albuquerque tonight. So what if they got there at 11, or midnight? He could do that. He could do anything. This was all he needed, a break to mentally reset. Now he was ready to... He rounded the corner of the last house before the road and stopped. The Circle K was now in full view, and from that angle he could see about 2/3 of the parking lot. He edged around, moving along the road so he could scan the rest. Yep, it was gone. There were several cars there, including a sparkly red sedan. A big guy was kneeling by the front, like he was checking the tire or something, but his father's white SUV was nowhere to be seen. But of course it wasn't. Ether had volunteered him to go hunting for the stupid rabbit, then had asked him for the keys, supposedly so she could move the vehicle. It had all been planned. If the theme of the lost bunny hadn't come up, she'd have just asked him to go off on some other errand, anything to get him away. As soon as he was out of sight, she'd driven off and was now almost an hour down the road toward Washington, D.C., or whatever her actual destination was, if it had just been another lie. He stood there, the nauseating realizations hitting him in waves. She had his father's car. She had the rest of the cash. She had his bag with his clothes, and, oh yeah, his father's fucking gun. If or when she committed a crime with it, they'd trace it back to him. He was going to puke. Here was another familiar sensation of being humiliated down to a level lower than he'd previously thought existed. When you're so far down the social ladder that you're basically lying on the floor, that's when they love to stomp you the most, to grind your face into the shit. Ether had seen him coming a mile away, because she saw in him what everyone saw. A clueless outcast whose people skills were so poor that tricking him was as easy as kicking an old dog. Now he was stuck in Arizona, with no phone, no car. What was he supposed to do? Call the police? Call his father? Explain to both of them how easily he'd been swindled? How stupidly trusting he'd been? God, Ether was probably laughing her ass off right now. Would be telling her criminal friends for years about the easiest mark she'd ever found. He'd never even made her tell him her real name. Logically, the thing to do was go back to the Circle K and beg to use their phone. But the only way they'd let him is if he explained that he'd been the victim of a crime, that his car had been stolen, and that he was stranded. The staff had seen him come in with Ether, so they'd instantly know what had happened, would think it was hilarious. He imagined them snickering at him from behind the counter, and decided he'd just find someplace else. He looked around for another gas station, and started walking, in a daze. Maybe he should just step into traffic instead. Malort. It was when the cops showed up that Malort got really confused. First of all, they hadn't seemingly had time to respond to a call from inside the store, unless a cruiser happened to be nearby at that moment, which was of course possible. There were probably plenty of donut joints around. But if they'd come in response to a call about a mass shooter, they certainly were being chill about it. A single cruiser came rolling up, no sirens or anything, acting like they were doing a courtesy wellness check. It was only when they were right up on the scene that they'd spotted the school shooter and flown into action. They hit the lights and skidded to a stop, jumping out and taking cover behind their doors, screaming commands. At that point, Malort tried to crawl into the Grand National to get the hell out of there, figuring they would surely appreciate having one fewer potential victim on the scene. Instead, one cop pointed his gun Malort's direction and screamed for him to get fucking down or get fucking shot. He didn't normally like complying with cops, but sometimes you have to pick your battles. He tossed the shotgun into the Buick and then got low, thinking that if he were about to die, he was going to go out how he lived, with absolutely no idea what the hell was going on. Abbott. A vehicle came pulling up next to Abbott, and he thought maybe it was the two bunny moms, having spotted him trudging miserably down the sidewalk. But then he heard Ether say, "Where are you going? Get in!" He spun to face her. "Where did you go?" It was an accusation. Even in this moment, he was absolutely convinced that she'd abandoned him, but had just changed her mind. "When you went hunting for Petey, I circled around the block to pick you up. You were getting so far away, and I was trying to save you the walk back. But then you started walking back anyway, and at that point, I had to circle around again. I've been chasing you for several minutes. It was comical. Let's go, hero." She climbed over into the passenger seat, and he stood there for a moment, still enraged, but now struggling to grasp exactly why. He felt his anger begin to dissipate, but also felt an inexplicable impulse to cling to it with all his might. "Come on," she said, like she was urging a dog to come in from the yard. She was chewing on a Slim Jim. He stood there, looking at her for a moment, then finally came around and slid behind the wheel. She pointed. "You can turn up around here." He didn't move. Through chewed jerky, she asked, "What's wrong?" "Did you try to leave me just then? Did you try to abandon me and then come back because you decided you needed my help or whatever?" No, Abbott, even if I was a terrible person, why would I do that? If I didn't need a driver, I wouldn't have hired one." "You'd have gotten a free $100,000 SUV and a loaded gun." Ether suddenly got serious, turning to face him. "Okay, Abbott, look at me. Hey, are you listening? You know those post-apocalyptic zombie shows where they have to cross the wastelands and they're like, 'We can't trust anybody out here, we're on our own'? Well, that's a geek fantasy for indoor kids. Out here, in the real world, in the actual desert, this is when you have to be willing to trust people. You don't stand a chance otherwise. Trust is the only advantage humans have as a species, that millions of us can all get together and trust one another. Yes, including weird people you just met earlier in the day." After a moment, Abbott shook his head and pulled back into traffic. Not because Ether was convincing him, but because he could feel the annoyance of the drivers who were having to swerve around them. He'd spent half of his life sensing he was in someone's way, and the other half actually being in someone's way, but failing to sense it. In the cup holder between the seats was one of the energy drinks he'd bought at the gas station. He opened it and took a sip. "What flavor is that?" asked Ether, clearly eager to start a new subject. He glanced at it. It has the word bomb in it, and it tastes like 1,000 sugary knives stabbing my tongue." "Ha! You know when that started? The era of flavors that don't exist in nature? With Dr. Pepper. A pharmacist brewed it. Before that, drinks were flavored like things that actually existed. Vanilla, cinnamon, grape. But he was like, 'No, this will taste like fun medicine.' Now we're drowning in fun chemicals 24 hours a day." Abbott heard more police sirens and wondered if one of the hometowners hadn't called the cops on him for prowling around their yard without permission. "Jesus," he said. Let's get away from this place before somebody else grabs us and robs us of hours of our time. Absolutely. Still, I want you to take a second to think about what you just did there. Finding the bunny? No, you just opened a beverage and took a drink without a second thought. That's trust. You don't know any of the thousands of strangers in the supply chain, and yet you took a drink with absolute certainty that it wasn't poison or tainted, that there weren't metal shavings or dead insects in the can. You trusted every one of those strangers so thoroughly that you didn't even devote 1 second of thought to it. And you did it because a lifetime of experience has taught you that they can be trusted, almost without fail. They don't do their jobs because they're trustworthy. They do it because they don't want to get fired or sued. Is that the only thing stopping you from poisoning somebody? No. That's what you'll find out here in the wastelands. Almost all of these people are just like you. They want to do the right thing, and every morning they wake up and go do it. Every single day. Malort. The school shooter wasn't dropping the AR-15, not because he was zealous about his mission, but because he was frozen with terror. He was yelling at the cops about the Russians, pointing like he was demanding they go arrest someone else. The kid was literally insisting they had the wrong guy while wearing a tactical vest strapped with another 90 rounds of ammo for the rifle he was carrying. The cops were yelling their final warnings and seemed to be ready to gun the kid down if he didn't comply within the next few seconds. And still, he didn't drop the rifle. Malort watched with anticipation, wondering if the kid would manage to take out either of the police before they ventilated his entire torso. At a moment when Malort was certain both cops had started pulling their fingers into their triggers, the girl in the Circle K shirt ran over to the kid, ripping the gun away and clawing him in the face. Then the cops started yelling at both of them, the school shooter now screaming and crying in protest. It was, without question, the funniest fucking thing Malort had ever seen. Then the cops were on them, pulling the gun away, pressing the school shooter to the pavement, begging the girl to calm down. Then they came toward Malort, guns drawn and amped up to 11. He held up his hands, trying to make his voice sound small and weak. "I'm not involved. Look at my plates. I'm from out of state. There's never a second gunman in a mass shooting. You know that. I'm just a bystander." As was typical, Malort's size, demeanor, and tats spoke louder than his reassurances. They yelled at him to get down, and he briefly considered jumping into the Buick and speeding away. But these guys were so revved up, they'd probably put 4 magazines in him before he even got a hand on the door. He got flat, saying, "I'm just here to get gas. I don't know anything about this." In general, the cops just seemed extremely unclear about the situation. Like they weren't at all sure why they were there or why they'd seen what they'd seen. So they hadn't come in response to the kid with the AR, and they didn't seem to be there for Malort. The kid, his ear pressed to the pavement and getting handcuffed, was yelling, "Find the navigator! It was just here! It's a white navigator!" But this, too, was all coming across as nonsense to the cops. "Hey!" shouted Malort, one pavement-pressed man to another. "How do you know about that?" "It was just here," replied the kid, over demands from the cops that he shut the hell up. "I saw it!" "When?" The cops shouted the kid into silence before he could answer. Just then, Malort turned his head, and there was the goddamned white Lincoln Navigator, rolling past at a leisurely pace, the girl visible in the passenger seat, some nerdy guy at the wheel. They rounded the corner toward the interstate and were gone. Malort cursed to himself, and also cursed loudly, to everyone in the vicinity. The two were taunting him by driving that slow, and now they knew their pursuer was on their heels and would surely check for the AirTag tracker. He'd blown it. Again. Abbott. Ether was looking down and cleaning her sunglasses with her shirt when Abbott glanced back and said, "Huh, there's a cop back there at the Circle K. You don't think they're there for us, do you? Should we go back?" She glanced over. "Looks like they got some kid on the ground. Maybe there was a foot chase and that's where it ended."
Are you sure?
We haven't done any crimes. Even if your dad called the cops, like, I let my son borrow my car for work and now he's doing too much work with it, go arrest him. You think that would trigger a nationwide search? To the point that the police in Arizona would be scouring the landscape? Seriously, you need to turn off that catastrophe reflex before it triggers a stroke.
But just to be clear, you've never done any crimes in your life.
I mean, I've never been convicted of anything. Wait, is this another attempt to get personal information from me?
We're at a stage where I need you to give me something. Anything. I mean, how old are you?
29. I'm from a totally unremarkable part of Indiana. I got a job that paid well enough that I moved my mom to LA, or, the vicinity.
You're not a criminal, but you don't want me to know your real name. Why?
She adjusted her welcome to the shit show hat and busied herself settling in. Abbott knew she was stalling, but was willing to wait her out. What else was there to do? Finally, she said, The thing is, I've tried to leave that person behind. The person I used to be. It's not a gender transition thing or anything like that. I just got to a dark place and tried to make a clean break from that life. If I told you all the stuff I did, you wouldn't like me as much. And it's not cool stuff like robbing banks or selling drugs. It's mean and petty and gross stuff.
When we met, you asked me if sometimes, out of the blue, I'll cringe at a thing I did or said years ago. Is that what you're talking about? You lay awake and think about all the people you screwed over. Torture yourself with it.
There was another pause, and she watched the desert roll by, as if painful lowlights from her life were playing outside the window. I think, she said, I caused so many people so much pain for so little reason that my brain can't hold it all in. I finally realized I couldn't move on, couldn't live with my life unless I just rebooted myself. I think that should be a basic human right, don't you? To denounce your past? Even if there are records of it online, you should be able to say, I'm sorry and I've grown, and everyone should judge you based on how you act from then on. If somebody goes mining into your past for stuff to bring you down or embarrass you, they should be treated like the bad guy.
But you know that's not how it works, right?
Oh, trust me. I know.
Because people are going to preserve that version of you, from the part of your life when they felt the most superior to you.
She nodded. So, when I say I don't want to regale you with the anecdotes from my past, you understand and respect it, right? That doesn't make me suspicious.
I guess not any more suspicious than anybody else you'd run into around LA. It's all losers thinking they could come to SoCal and instantly become cool, leaving all their cringe behind in Iowa or Ohio, or Florida, in my case.
Abbott set the cruise control, and again thought about putting on some music, or anything to keep the silence at bay. I'm not crazy, said Ether abruptly, as if she'd been continuing the conversation in her head. We're just two normal people doing a normal job.
Sure. So, when you picked me up, you said you were going to tell me all about the worms. Then you quickly changed the subject.
I did? I have a whole mental library of stuff that weirds out strangers. I have to be careful how I dole it out. So, tell me your heroic bunny story. Those ladies will be talking about that for the rest of their lives. You'll always be the handsome knight who swept in and saved Dump Truck the Rabbit.
Well, first of all, it turns out bunnies can die if you pick them up wrong.
Chapter 8. Key. When she'd retired, Key had promised herself she'd do things like get high in her bathtub by candlelight, maybe while reading a book. She'd never actually done it until tonight, when she'd forced herself into the tub and taken an edible, mainly because it was either do that or go break into the Phil Green house to see it for herself. She figured she was less likely to get arrested this way. She was not, of course, reading a book, but endlessly scrolling on her phone for Navigator news, substituting knowledge for action, her bath water steadily cooling around her. She'd briefly had an intrusive thought about slitting her wrists in the tub, the way they do in movies when they want to make a suicide look tragic but sensual. But then she'd imagined the putrefaction stink that would greet her landlord when he finally came to investigate, and all the insects that would use the Key corpse stew as a breeding pool. Damn, she'd forgotten what she was like on edibles. It had taken some digging to get the info on the tattoo guy. The sparkly red car was registered to a dude who definitely didn't match his description, but she now knew his name was Richard Little, known on the streets as Malort. He was a lifelong biker type with an arrest record that stretched back to the Reagan era. He'd just gotten out from his latest stint a few weeks ago, after doing time for stabbing another guy at a scrapyard in what looked to Key like a classic case of dirtbag on scumbag violence. A little social media snooping revealed his connection to Phil Green. Malort had some kind of relationship with Green's deceased daughter, Sunday, that's Sunday like ice cream Sunday, for decades. Key had found Malort among Sunday's Facebook photos, the most recent being an old pic of the two of them at Sturgis, the annual motorcycle rally so massive that the event temporarily doubled the population of South Dakota. The accompanying post was Sunday wishing Malort well behind bars. Don't serve the time, let the time serve you. Sunday Green had passed while he was still incarcerated, and one of Malort's very rare social media appearances was a long, single-paragraph rant about how he hadn't been allowed to be with her as she died, and how the healthcare system had denied her the experimental treatment that would surely have saved her life. In Key's mind, it all painted a fairly straightforward picture. This guy had a grievance against several SoCal institutions, and Sunday's crazy, paranoid father would no doubt have shared those grievances. Together, the two had hatched a plan to get back at everyone, maybe reaching out to a cell of other aspiring domestic terrorists online. They built a device, Malort probably intending to use it against the hospital, or City Hall, or take your pick. Others involved in the operation, including Phil Green, had disagreed, deciding they wanted the bomb to go off in D.C., to take out the president or Congress on the 4th of July, probably to symbolize the independence of a new nation or whatever. Now, one faction was transporting the bomb to D.C., the other was trying to bring it back to SoCal, but either party would probably set off the device the moment they were surrounded by a SWAT team, regardless of location. It didn't escape Key's notice that, if not for this schism inside the terror cell and the resulting death of one of the conspirators, authorities likely would not have heard anything about the plot until the device detonated in one of the target cities. She would have called this a lucky break, but the truth was that most such schemes fall apart from the inside. If your entire worldview is "don't tread on me," what's going to happen when a leader tries to impose rules? You'd think they learn to put their differences aside for the cause, but that's hard to do when you've been raised to believe there's no such thing as a minor disagreement. If you think that, say, a cashier failing to wish you a Merry Christmas is a sign of impending Christian genocide, you're probably not the type to hash out differences over brunch. So, now the device was hundreds of miles away from where Key was currently marinating, probably still moving, maybe along Interstate 40, but maybe not. The couple could change their plans at any time. The navigator could be crawling along an unmarked trail through the woods, or it could already have been abandoned for another vehicle. Over the next few days, they could wind up anywhere in the 3 million square miles of United States. And it would be a long shot to catch them, even if every Fed, state trooper, and beat cop in the country were looking for them. And, as far as Key could tell, none of them were. Everyone was helpless, she thought, as she tried to summon the monumental strength of will required to exit the lukewarm bath. As Patrick used to say, we're all just babies trapped in God's hot parked car. Abbott. By the time they entered Albuquerque, Abbott was falling asleep behind the wheel, over and over. It was that terrifying ambush sleep that happens on long night drives, the brain briefly flickering out for seconds at a time, perceptible only by the surrounding cars and signs suddenly blinking to a different position. It wasn't even midnight in his native time zone, but it felt like he'd been awake for a week. The idea of doing 3 more days of this was laughable. They had stopped twice. Bathroom at a Shell station, food from a combo McDonald's/truck stop. But otherwise, the trip had offered nothing to break up the monotony since leaving Flagstaff. Abbott did get one brief scare when multiple vehicles exited behind him and suddenly revealed that the remaining tail was an old, bright red sedan that he thought looked a lot like the one he glimpsed in the Circle K parking lot. But it eventually fell farther and farther back, shrinking from view. Just another sleepy driver on their own adventure. Ether had been dozing off and on for much of that span, but Abbott had forced her awake to help him navigate, and she led him to a cluster of what seemed like a dozen chain hotels. They stopped at the very first one, Abbott feeling like he wasn't sure he even had the energy to stumble up to a bed. We made it," yawned Ether as they jumped down from the vehicle. "A quarter of the country down. Suck it." Jesus, how are we only a quarter of the way? This country's huge. Abbott arched his back, feeling like he'd aged his spine 10 years in a single day. Are they going to let us stay here without a credit card? You said we have to do cash the whole trip, right? I have a card. It can't be tracked to me. This is the kind of thing you learn to work around when you're living off the grid. Is that legal? Don't they ask for it? He froze. A car had positioned itself so that it was now blocking the entrance to the parking lot, angled across both lanes. Passing headlights revealed it to be a glittery red. If it wasn't the exact same car from the Circle K lot, it seemed exceptionally weird to run into 2 old cars with that paint job, unless it was just an Arizona thing. He took a few steps in that direction. Had they followed them from Flagstaff? If so, why? The first thought from his sluggish brain was that he'd left something valuable behind at the gas station, and this good Samaritan had followed them for 5+ hours to give it back. Abbott kept shuffling in that direction and said, "Hey, do you know who that is?" Ether came up behind him, started to say, "Who are you?" And then she grabbed his shirt and pulled him backward. Go, get in," she breathed. "Move." A guy was getting out of the red car now, looking right at them. "Who is that?" "Ether, what's happening?" "Hey!" She kept pulling him toward the navigator. Then she let go and ran around to the driver's side and jumped in, starting the engine. "Get in!" He had no choice but to obey, as her level of panic said it was either jump in or be left behind. They took off in the opposite direction of the red car, Abbott looking back to find a giant bald man was now running after them. "Who is that?" "It's the guy who tried to steal the box. He followed us. Oh my God, he followed us from California. Oh my God." She flew through the lot, rounded a corner, and found no other exit. Just a curb and a row of bushes separating the parking from the street. Abbott could sense the decision she was about to make and yelled for her not to do it. She sped up and smashed through the bushes, the vehicle bouncing up and over the curb, then tilting as she twisted the wheel and tore down the street. Abbott had felt the scalping of the branches under the SUV as a wound to his own body. She had scratched his father's immaculate, sacred navigator. "Where are you going?" "We can't stay here. We have to get off the path, off the route." She exited onto a highway she'd seemingly chosen at random, going way too fast. "Is he back there?" she asked, adjusting the rearview mirror. The speedometer was pushing 80. "I don't think so." This is my fault. I took us on the straightest, most obvious route. I made it easy for him. He's probably been hanging back a few cars this whole time, all day. What road are we on?" The sign back there said El Paso." "Give me the map." He did, and after a few minutes, she said, Okay, look for an exit to 380, heading east. That'll get us going back in the right direction. We'll find another place to stay. We'll just need some separation. Then we'll be fine. He's still not back there?" "No. I mean, I don't see him." "Good. Okay, that should be it. He didn't see which way we went. There are like 7 different highways we could have taken out of town. Or we could have stayed somewhere else in town, for all he knows. We lost him. We'll be fine. We just took the obvious route. That's all. That was our mistake, staying on 40. I mean, you're sure you didn't bring any devices, right? Like, in secret?" "No." "Are you sure? Nothing you could have tracked?" "Yes. You can check my bag." "Okay. Me neither. Okay. Yeah, that has to be it. He just knew we'd take the interstate and caught up because we'd been slow, stopping so much. Obvious and slow. My mistake. But we're okay. We're fine. She nodded, took a deep breath, then checked the mirror one more time. Zeke. There's a feeling that there is no word for yet, because no one had ever experienced it prior to the internet era. The dizzying sensation of seeing an online drama escape into the real world. Zeke always compared it to watching that demon girl crawl out of the TV in The Ring. A barrier of safety and unreality breached and violated right before your eyes. He was now in bed, but a million miles from sleep, terrified of missing the next bombshell. So now, he was lying there, the room dark, aside from the glow of the phone lighting his face. The kid with the AR-15 had tried to stream his one-man terrorism intervention live, but the broadcast had gotten shut down by Facebook admins while the idiot was still walking toward the Circle K. After that, Zeke had been flying blind along with the rest of the, well, he didn't like to think of it as an audience, but couldn't come up with a better word. Some idiots from the subreddit had continued calling the store afterward to ask the harried employees if they could stick their head out and see if a shooting and or dirty bomb detonation was occurring in their parking lot. Then again, it's not like Zeke had any better ideas. At one point, he flipped out and told Cammy that they were driving to Flagstaff, but she just sat there calmly and told him that it was 6 states away and that whatever was happening would be over long before they got there. So, Zeke had instead started refreshing 8 feeds on 2 devices, waiting for any scrap of information, feeling like he'd been left dangling over a precipice. It was like the time he'd received a letter from his doctor, implying there was grave news that could only be shared in person. Then, when he'd called to make an appointment, was told the doctor had gone on vacation for 2 weeks. Eventually, there was some Flagstaff police scanner traffic about a minor getting arrested for brandishing a firearm, but there had been no mention of anyone getting shot, or a weapon of mass destruction being impounded, or anyone else getting arrested. Since then, nothing. Everyone was left to let the scenario play out in their imaginations. Even the contaminated Circle K truck story had faded from the trending lists, replaced with the war in Ukraine, news of a former sitcom star going to jail for sexual assault, state governments rolling back abortion rights, and some military officials casually revealing that the unidentified objects captured on their sensors were probably alien spacecraft. All the usual stuff. Zeke had spent the hours after dinner struggling to focus as he finished his commissioned art. This piece was for a regular customer who paid top dollar for depictions of sexual pairings between characters from the animated Disney film Zootopia and the live-action detective series Bosch, a genre that he apparently could not find elsewhere. Zeke had kept the subreddit open on his second monitor, but it was starting to fill with assholes, trolls, and conspiracy whack jobs. Everyone was in the mood for the next plot twist, and several were being dreamed up and tested on the fly. The platform elevated posts according to popular vote, so the bullshit that rose to the top was whatever made-up scenario the users enjoyed yelling about most. There was the undercover Russian saboteur theory, which was based on nothing but a fuzzy old photo and wishful thinking. Someone else had claimed GSG was a radical right-wing terrorist with ties to some survivalists in the LA area, based entirely around a report that some old man had died nearby and that he had maybe driven a Blue Ranger at some point. Others claimed she was a leftist out to murder Congress for not acting on climate change. Others believed that they'd identified her as a former YouTube star who was doing it all as a viral stunt. He would have tried to rein in the bullshit, but it was a rule of the internet that any efforts to censor content only gave it credibility. The human brain loves novelty and excitement, and, well, what's more novel than a weird lie somebody pulled straight out of their ass? And what's more exciting than forbidden knowledge, defying the authorities to uncover what they tried to keep hidden? Even worse, Zeke could already sense where this was going to wind up. If nothing solid could be learned about GSG, somebody was going to try digging up dirt on Abbott. At that point, certain old videos would be unearthed, and then, well, things could get ugly. Abbott. It took shockingly little time for Abbott's body to transition from amped-up panic to sleep, as if his nervous system had abruptly tripped a circuit breaker while ether was putting miles between them and Albuquerque. When he opened his eyes again, the first thing he saw was a billboard featuring a big-eyed alien, a gray. "You awake?" asked Ether, who looked half dead. "God, it's so weird to drive this thing. I feel like I'm on stilts. You can see down into cars when they pass. I swear one guy had his dick out." The billboard passed out of view, and Abbott said, "Did that sign say we're heading toward Roswell? As in, where the supposed UFO crashed in the 1940s? "Huh. Yeah, we're not too far away. You've been out for more than 2 hours. It's almost 3 in the morning. You snore, by the way. Have you been checked for sleep apnea? It sounds like you almost stop breathing sometimes." "What are you talking about? Where are we? Ether, there is no way you picked Roswell at random." "We were already in New Mexico. I saw it on the map, figured there'd be a lot of hotels there, all the alien tourists and all that." Abbott sat up straighter, his skull throbbing like it was suddenly 2 sizes too small for his brain. "Look, if this was your plan all along, please tell me now. If the box contains what you believe to be UFO parts or other alien artifacts, just say so." "There are no aliens involved in this operation, to the best of my knowledge. It's fine. Everything is fine and normal, and we're not being followed. I've been checking constantly. That guy didn't tail us out of Albuquerque. I'm sure of it. Help me look for a hotel." The city limits were marked by a sign depicting a flying saucer sucking livestock into its cargo hold, the whole thing lit by spinning lights. "Jesus, they're really milking this UFO thing," said Abbott. "So that guy back there, you recognized him, right?" "When I went to pick up the box and the cash, he was there, this huge, bald tattoo monster. He tried to attack me, yelling, 'Where is it?' and acting like if he caught me, he'd stomp me into pancetta. I got away. It's just like I told you before." "And you don't know him outside of that? This isn't like an existing relationship at all?" Ether hesitated, and Abbott sensed she was trying to figure out how to share this piece of information without spilling the whole thing. "I'd only ever heard about him secondhand," she said. "He was part of a biker gang. They sold meth and stolen car parts, all that stuff." "And he's some kind of super hacker that can track cell phones and break into store security cameras? I'm sorry, I'm trying to connect my impression of this lone tattoo monster in an old sedan with you having to keep your face partially covered at all times and insisting we can't swipe a credit card without blowing our cover. Outlaw bikers are organized crime. They have their methods. I thought we were being overly cautious, but..." She let out an exhausted sigh. "Apparently not." Abbott had assumed the hotels would all be whimsical places shaped like flying saucers, but they were the same old chains you saw everywhere. He noted multiple signs welcoming visitors to the UFO festival, apparently it being held from July 1st through 3rd. He imagined a hot, crowded event full of insufferable alien true believers and tourists who'd come to take kitschy photos of them for their social media. They eventually found a place that Ether declared to be suitable, and she parked at the rear of a church next door. The building positioned between their vehicle and the hotel, blocking the sight lines from any pursuer who might creep through the hotel's lot. She went in to book the rooms, and Abbott jumped out to examine the front end, bracing himself for the aftermath of its encounter with the Albuquerque landscaping. He winced at the sight of scratches around the bumper and caressed them with his fingers. Some of the wounds were deep. Even if he tried to buff them out, his father would notice the damage from 2 blocks away. The trip was, of course, over. It had been mostly over the moment Abbott had seen the terrifying man blocking their exit from that parking lot, and absolutely over once he heard the shrubs raking the undercarriage. He hadn't signed up for that, and had frankly already done more than could be expected. He'd tell Ether in the morning. He'd keep a prorated payment of $50,000 and leave her to hire some braver/dumber man to take her the rest of the way. Then he'd go back to his father, wave the wad of cash at him, and peel off some bills to fix the scratches on the nav. Then he'd get on stream and tell his wild story about how he'd driven a crazy chick to Roswell while dodging attacks from a violent biker gang. It would be at least a week's worth of content, if not two. "Sorry that took so long," said Ether, while Abbott was still sitting on the pavement by the bumper, lost in thought. "The night clerk is an amazing rapper. He had to play several tracks for me. He's pretty good." He looked up to see she held a room key card. Just one. "Now, they only had one room with one bed, so we'll have to share. I told them it'd be fine. I've seen this come up in a bunch of movies. It always turns out okay. The couple never falls in love or anything." "What?" "I'm just kidding." She handed him the card. "See you in the morning. I'm sleeping out here." "What?" he said again, in the exact same tone. "It's fine. I've slept in lots of vehicles in my time. I can sleep anywhere. There's a nice little nook in the back if I scoot the box over, but I don't want to leave it unattended, and it doesn't make sense to drag it up to the room and then have to drag it all the way back down in the morning. And if we should have to make a quick escape, not that we will, but just should that come up, it'll be easier if the box is already loaded up and ready to go." "But that means you'd need the key fob, because otherwise it's not going to let you lock the doors or run the air if it gets too hot out here, which it will, since it's at least 90. "I understand if you don't want to give me the keys. It'll be fine. You still think I tried to leave you behind earlier. I get it." He stood, sighed, and massaged his stiff neck. "Okay, we'll both sleep in the Navigator." "Are you sure? It can be rough if you're not used to it." "I'll sit up front and lean the seat back. It's pretty comfortable. But think how stupid this is, that we just wasted money on the hotel room that's going to sit empty." "Not at all. We have access to a bathroom now. In the morning, when we wake up feeling like shit, we can go in there one at a time, poop, shower, probably masturbate, all at once if we want. We've lost a few hours with the rabbit situation and the tattoo monster attack, but we can make it up. 1 extra hour over the next few days. Maybe drive like 5 miles an hour faster. It'll be fine. Everything is fine and normal." Abbott made a noise that didn't specify agreement or disagreement. None of what happened the rest of the way was going to be his problem. They settled in, Ether spooning the box, Abbott reclining in a chair that was pretty nice for an automobile, but not something you'd actually want to sleep in if you had a choice. He'd assumed he'd instantly pass out from exhaustion and trauma, but immediately found himself fighting the same struggle as every other night, the same one Ether had mentioned within the first 5 minutes of meeting him. He couldn't turn off his brain. He said, "There's something that doesn't make sense." Ether didn't reply for a moment, and Abbott wondered if she was already asleep. Then she mumbled, "What's that?" "You got hired to move this box. You went to pick it up, and there was a scary guy trying to take it. Why didn't you just let him have it? You already said you don't care about the money, so why risk your life?" More silence. Then, "I don't care about the money, but I have a debt to repay. Something I need to make right. It's the same with you, isn't it? I mean, it's not about the money itself. It's getting away from your dad, starting a new life. Neither of us are going through all this trouble for diamonds and jet skis. Can I come up there? This is actually incredibly uncomfortable." "I don't think it's any better, but sure." She moved into the passenger seat and laboriously went about trying to contort into a human sleeping position. Across the church parking lot was an inflatable alien, the same classic gray design with the black almond eyes that could probably be found in every single gift shop within a 50-mile radius. Abbott silently rehearsed how he was going to break off the deal in the morning, absently watching the inflatable alien sway in the breeze, bumping gently into a road sign. "Do you know where they came from?" asked Ether. "The little gray aliens with the big black eyes." "You mean, what planet?" "No, I mean the original story. The very first person who saw one." "They supposedly found them here, right? In the Roswell crash." "No," she said with alarming enthusiasm. "The Roswell craft was just a military balloon with radiation gadgets on it to detect Russian nuclear tests. The government actually pushed the UFO thing to throw people off the scent. The Greys came about years later from an incident in 1961. Before that, there were no famous alien abductions, no short, big-eyed aliens, no operating tables and anal probes. The story is actually really scary. Maybe too scary. I don't want you to be up all night creeped out. Abbott muttered, and tried to drift off as this woman, who insisted she wasn't into alien stuff, was clearly preparing to launch into a diatribe about alien stuff. We probably should get some sleep. Okay. He lay there and could feel how badly she wanted to tell the story. So, he said, all right, tell me about the aliens. It's not about the aliens, she said. I swear it's relevant to what we're doing here. It's all about how nightmares come to life and rampage through society. Okay, so what happened was, there was a middle-aged couple named Betty and Barney Hill. They'd gone on a road trip to Canada and were heading back. They'd been on the road for 18 hours, winding through the mountains. It was pitch dark. Then this light appears in the sky. It's swooping around, moving erratically. So they start following it, trying to get a look at it through their binoculars. Finally, it comes and hovers over their car. Then their memories become jumbled, and they find themselves driving home again, having lost like 3 hours. Or so they claimed, said Abbott. Hold on, there's more. Betty said her dress was ripped. They had weird marks in their car. Barney had a ring of warts around his penis. Really? Yeah. And if you think they made it all up as a hoax, keep in mind the only people they told was their nearest Air Force base. They were like, hey, we've got glowing sky objects out here giving people genital warts. They didn't call the press, didn't try to sell a book. So they just blanked out. Where did the gray aliens come in? I'm getting to that. So, a week later, Betty starts having dreams about that night where she and her husband are walking through the woods in a trance, then getting taken on board a spaceship and stuck with needles. She obsesses about it for a couple of years, and then arranges for both of them to be hypnotized, to recover their lost memories. Once they got Barney under, he suddenly remembers the abduction too. He starts screaming and crying, ranting about how once he was on the alien exam table that it felt like a pair of eyes had pushed into his brain to see inside it. Abbott said, okay, that is creepy. Yeah, he suddenly remembers being anally probed, says they put a cup on his penis, all that. And for the first time, both he and Betty describe their abductors as the short, bald, gray aliens with the big black eyes, the ones everybody sees now, the ones on all the merch around town. And you think it really happened? I think that all of it, replied Ether after a yawn, and all of this you see around you was because of drowsy driving and a light bulb. What? In the mountains they drove through, at the exact spot where they said they saw the UFO, there's a big light on an observation tower. And when you're on that twisting mountain road in the dark, the light appears to swing from one side of the sky to the other. Their missing time was just the two of them underestimating how long the trip would take. You know, because they kept stopping to try to get a look at the supposed spaceship. Their memories were jumbled because they'd been driving all day. They were exhausted and sleep deprived, just like we are now. That's it. That's the whole thing. Betty's abduction dream was just that. A dream. But what about all the stuff they remember under hypnosis? Well, for one, there's no such thing as recovering memories under hypnosis. That's pseudoscience. The brain doesn't work like that. Hearing about his wife's dream over and over was enough to incept the idea into Barney's brain as a real memory that he recovered during hypnotherapy. And, you know, he loved his wife. He probably wanted to have that memory to reassure her that she wasn't crazy. As for the gray aliens, that's the best part. The creatures they described under hypnosis just happened to look almost exactly like the aliens featured in a sci-fi TV show that aired 2 weeks before they started their sessions. But none of what you said explains the physical evidence. How did the guy wind up with warts around his dick? Who knows? I mean, that's the whole point. Once they settled on a truth, everything else could be reframed to fit. If their dog had died, they'd have probably blamed it on the aliens. That's just how the brain works. It wants to shape everything into a narrative. Once you realize that, the whole world starts to make more sense. Or less sense. So why are you so creeped out by it?
if none of it happened. I'm creeped out because none of it happened. The story finally leaked, against their will, years later. Then it became a book, then a movie, spreading around the world to every population with access to mass media, like a thought virus. Soon, a guy came forward and was like, yeah, those are the aliens I saw at Roswell, now that I think of it, even though it had absolutely not been mentioned before. Thousands of people have reported abductions since then, mostly conforming to this original template that literally came from a random woman's dream and a TV show. At the time this happened, almost nobody believed aliens had visited Earth. Today, most Americans do. 500 years from now, I bet people will still be hallucinating grays and abductions and probings. There's this whole reality that people all over the world believe, mind, body, and soul, and when you trace it back to its origin, you find nothing at all. Just a story so weird and terrifying that it becomes infectious, with mass media acting as the vector. Yep, that was pretty fucking creepy, alright. It didn't escape Abbott's notice that this tale was also evidence of how easily crazy can spread from a woman to a man inside an enclosed vehicle. His final thought before falling asleep was that he was getting out just in time. The following is an excerpt from the blog of Phil Green. What must be understood is that the parasite manipulates with pleasure. When Euhaplorchus californiensis infects the California-killing fish, it need not inject venom or mind-altering chemicals to subdue its victim. It merely tickles the dopamine receptors until the fish thrashes and splashes with what to it must feel like rapturous joy, a behavior that quickly attracts predators, allowing the fish to be eaten and the parasite to spread. The mechanism is simple, and the operation identical in the micro or macro, in animals or humans. A burst of short-term pleasure will blind the subject to its long-term well-being and cause it to function as little more than a puppet. Our old religions created strong societies by cultivating humans who could delay gratification, building a tolerance for suffering that would see them through the hard winter, the invading army, the totalitarian usurper. The modern religion of consumerist instant gratification, on the other hand, serves only the masters for whom the zombified subjects make perfect cattle, relinquishing their freedom and individuality in exchange for the next paltry release of soothing opiates. The effects wear off sooner with each dose, each time leaving the subject hungry and ashamed, a sort of post-ejaculate clarity that in the moment reveals the true state of its abject slavery, making the victim all the more eager to submit fully to the only source of pleasure and comfort it has ever known. The question is not how to save mankind, but if what we are attempting to save can even still be called mankind. I visited my girls' graves today. Nearby, a young woman in skimpy black clothes posed over a gravestone for a photographer, his face full of piercings and tattoos, creating photos for strangers to masturbate to. I wanted to kill them, but knew that they could not perceive the sanctity of that place, that the organ tuned to sense the sacred had been removed when they were too young to even understand what was being extracted from them. I hate them. I pity them. I feel nothing toward them. I feel nothing toward anyone. Day 2. I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would not be one cheerful face on the earth. Whether I shall ever be better, I cannot tell. I awfully forebode I shall not. To remain as I am is impossible. I must die or be better, it appears to me. Abraham Lincoln, in a letter to a friend, 1841. Chapter 9. Abbott. He was dreaming about aliens, of the navigator lifted into the sky via a beam of light. But because it was a dream, inside the UFO was Abbott's father, and the ship was a flying roofing machine, and his father was yelling about how roofs were leaking all over the Inland Empire because he'd had to come deal with Abbott's nonsense. While deep in this state of REM sleep,
Abbott's entire nervous system was on fire with that feeling of being in big trouble. His father, raging and rapping on the window with his knuckles, demanding he get out of the vehicle while the tension twisted and pulled at the bones of his chest. Some part of his brain knew the knocking on the glass was real, that it was a noise coming from outside his dream. He blocked it out for as long as he could, then pulled his eyelids open with considerable effort, instantly assaulted by the terrible sun beating down through the windshield. Abbott strained to turn his head and found himself looking down the double barrels of a shotgun. A gravelly voice said, "Get out." Hunter. An infuriating job site crisis had come along at just the right time to prevent any of Hunter's men from asking him about Abbott. The crew was spending their Friday, and probably the weekend, fixing a roof that had failed inspection because the inspector was brand new and apparently nobody taught him where to step on clay tile. So now, there were photos of cracked tiles that Hunter knew for a fact were not cracked before the inspector got his fat ass up there. But he hadn't been around to deal with it himself because he'd lost most of his Thursday over this Abbott bullshit. He'd gotten the boys started on the work, then sneaked off to his Ram to spend 5 minutes downing his breakfast, the biggest goddamned iced coffee allowed by law. Much to his dismay, his business partner, Pedro, had followed him over, clearly fighting for dear life to keep the smirk off his face. "So," said Pedro, "you want to talk about—" "No, and I don't want anybody giving me shit about it. I assume everybody knows?" "Just to be clear," said Pedro, "you think your kid partnered up with a hot chick he'd never met before to take an illegal trip out of state in exchange for a huge pile of cash from the Russian mob, and you're ashamed of this? I wish my boy would do something that cool. He never leaves his room." "Wait, is that the version you heard?" "I just watched a TikTok about it, but I wasn't giving it my full attention, as I was driving and eating at the same time." Pedro had been Hunter's business partner for 17 years, a case of two perfectionists who were fortunate enough to find each other because no one else could tolerate them. Hunter would rather rip up a brand new roof and start over rather than leave imperfect work in the world. He'd lost 6 figures on jobs that he'd redone for reasons that were invisible to anyone but him, and, invariably, Pedro. His partner hadn't started as a roof guy, but a tile guy, which was perfect. Tile guys tended to see themselves as artists, surgeons. Hunter believed, with all his heart and soul, that guys like them were part of a dying breed of masters, leaving behind work that would baffle generations of mediocrities. "I tried to go online, where his nerd friends all hang out," said Hunter, before downing a quarter of the iced coffee in one shot, trying to get the stuff into his veins as quickly as possible. "They've started a rumor that the girl is a Russian spy." Pedro shook his head. "You know, I don't want any harm to come to Abbott, but damn, this is the kind of harm I prayed for at his age. Russian spy babes, waving money around to go on dangerous missions? That shit never came my way. Not once. You, talked to the cops yet?" "I thought about reporting the Navigator as stolen, but I've heard those reports go right into the trash. Cops don't got time for that. That's the Wild West out here. Kids are getting snatched off the streets, women getting carjacked at gunpoint." "What are you going to say if they show up at your door asking about Russian spies and all that?" "I'll tell them whatever they want to know. After that, whatever happens, happens. Abbott's not my kid anymore. He's a grown man." "Nah," said Pedro. "He's still your kid." He pointed. "And I think the feds are here." Hunter assumed this was a joke, as it was exactly the kind of thing Pedro would think was hilarious to say. But, over by the sidewalk, a woman with fierce cop vibes was flashing her ID at one of the crew, who pointed her toward Hunter. Pedro shuffled away and wished him luck. Hunter stood upright and wondered if the entire trajectory of his life was about to change. Key. She was wearing one of her old work suits, chosen because it definitely made her look like an FBI agent, even though, much to her annoyance, not a single person had ever told Key that it made her specifically look like Dana Scully. She always told herself it's because she was 7 inches taller than Gillian Anderson's 5'3", Any perp worth his salt could have punted that woman like a football. Key had arrived at a job site to find several grumpy men kneeling over open boxes of clay roof tiles, apparently deciding they'd been shipped the wrong shade or something. One guy was on the phone arguing with a supplier, and when she'd asked him if Hunter Coburn was around, he pointed to a man standing by a jacked-up silver Dodge Ram that looked like it could easily run over her Volkswagen Passat. It had a bumper sticker boasting that the driver was a former Marine, which meant the driver believed there was, in fact, no such thing as a former Marine. Hunter saw her coming and was clearly bracing himself. She didn't flash the retired ID. She figured she'd wait for him to ask. "Mr. Coburn, can I have a word with you?" Showing nothing on his face, he simply asked, "Did you find him?" "I assume you're talking about your son. I just wanted to ask you a few questions." "Do I need an attorney?" The answer to this question is actually yes, every time, regardless of whether you're being interviewed as a suspect or a witness, as law enforcement absolutely does not have to tell you which one you are. Instead of saying that, Key replied, "I'm just trying to get some information right now. Nothing formal." This had always been Key's favorite technique. Thanks to Hollywood, suspects thought that you always got read your rights upon arrest. The detective saying, "You have the right to remain silent," as he slaps on the cuffs, makes for a nice dramatic moment. In reality, the Miranda warning only happens if you're being interviewed in custody. If they choose to interview you about being in custody, say if they show up to your workplace under the guise of having a casual conversation, they don't have to read you any rights at all. In this case, of course, this was actually an informal conversation, because Key had no legal authority to do anything else. What Hunter presumed about the circumstances was none of her business. "Have you heard from your son in the last 24 hours? "No. He left a note before he took off. That's it." "So you don't know where he is?" "I've been expecting somebody to show up either telling me he's in custody or asking me to come identify a body." Key thought he seemed equally unperturbed by both scenarios, and wondered if the man was stoic or just a shithead. She said, "You think he's in danger?" "No idea. The note said he got offered cash to make a delivery. That was it. I still have the note. Nothing was discussed with me before or after. He left his phone and laptop behind. The woman he's with isn't familiar to me. I've never had any interaction with her and have never heard Abbott speak of her. Is she a terrorist? That's what the internet is saying." "We're just trying to sort through the noise, just like you. But just for context, has Abbott ever expressed extremist opinions around you? To be clear, it is not illegal to express extreme views. This country was founded by extremists, and as such, they were careful to protect anti-government shit-talking in the Bill of Rights. I'm only asking if anything he said could have made him a recruitment target for the real bad guys." "He's never said or done anything extreme around me. He's a lump. He sits around and consumes, like he thinks that's his purpose in life, to let other people build and grow so that he can just slurp up what they make while giving nothing back, until he dies." Ah, shithead it is. If Key was trying to build a psychological profile on Abbott, she figured she had half of it standing in front of her. "There is talk online that some videos have surfaced of your son expressing, well, certain views. You're not aware of that part of his content?" This was something that had just started bubbling up that morning. Key hadn't had time to watch the videos, but the online communities tracking the case had already come to believe that Abbott Coburn fit a certain archetype of young, angry male. "No," said Hunter. "I mean, are you talking about actual extremist views, or views that were universal 10 years ago, but that the world has suddenly decided are extreme?" "Again, I'm just trying to get a sense of the context and his mental state." "But these questions don't make sense. If he ran into this lady through his rideshare job, he'd have been picked at random. That service doesn't let you ask for specific drivers. I know, because I'd pay quite a bit extra to be able to choose who picked me up." She shrugged. "Any system can be gamed. It could have been as simple as tracking Abbott's movements, planting herself nearby, and then requesting rides and canceling until she got her guy. This could have been in the works for months, for all we know." "What could have been in the works? Are you saying the rumors are right? That this is a terrorist attack on the Capitol? Something like that?
Hopefully not, but your son and the woman he's with are behaving in a manner that has certainly drawn some suspicion. A cash job, making extreme effort to avoid being tracked, the woman concealing her identity.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, something like that would still require a darkness my son doesn't have in him.
I would encourage you to watch his old videos.
What, did he threaten to go shoot up a mall? Is that what you think he is? A nerd who got bullied and is ready to take revenge on the world?
That's actually a misconception. Do you remember the first big school shooting in the 90s? Columbine.
Yeah, 2 kids, right? They were bullied for being goths, and somehow their parents didn't notice them building pipe bombs in their bedrooms.
Well, that first part is actually wrong. They weren't bullied, and in fact, Eric Harris was himself a bully, a standard-issue predator who was destined to kill somebody, someday. But the other kid, Dylan Klebold, he was just a rudderless, depressed teenager who, as far as anybody can tell, went along with it because it was something to do. I'm not saying Abbott is that first one, but you'd be surprised by how many of us can be that second one under the right circumstances, just sort of numb, looking for something big and exciting to be a part of.
Hunter shook his head, like he was pondering why the universe chose to place all of its burdens on him and him alone. I've tried my whole life to make Abbott into some kind of normal human being, to get him into hobbies, to introduce him to friends, to get him to care about some kind of career. What's a parent supposed to do? Everyone blames mom and dad in the aftermath. But seriously, what? Should I have kicked him out of the house? Have I gone too easy on him?
There are millions of kids just like Abbott. We could spend the rest of the day talking about how and why.
Key wasn't going to mention that one factor was having parents who primarily worry about how their offspring's failures reflect on themselves.
My point is, it's perfectly valid to think of Abbott as a potential victim in need of rescue, regardless of what the world is saying about him right now. If you have any means at all of contacting Abbott or locating him, please let me know. Can I give you my number?
Sure, but just know that the second you walk away, I'm calling my lawyer. I'm going to get out in front of this thing, whatever it is. I'm not losing my business over this. I've worked too hard.
Key's mind produced a series of ugly responses to that, and she was proud of herself for suppressing all of them in favor of, "That, of course, is your right."
Abbott. On one hand, Abbott knew he was awake. You can mistake a dream for real life, but you can't mistake real life for a dream. But on the other hand, he was looking through a car window at an almost comically terrifying bald thug with a tattoo on his neck. It was exactly, perfectly, something out of a nightmare. He remained frozen, blinking sleep from his eyes, until the guy growled, "Get out," a second time. Then Abbott opened the door and turned to wake Ether. She wasn't there. He stumbled down from the vehicle, his legs barely functional. The tattoo monster's gun was a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun, the kind you'd expect from a bandit in a Mad Max post-apocalypse, adding to the impression that he had been birthed directly from the hallucinations of a paranoid mind. The beast leaned over and peered into the rear of the Navigator, confirming for himself that the precious box was indeed back there. "Give me the keys." It doesn't have keys. It has one of those wireless key fob things. "Then give me the fob, fuckstick." Abbott reached into his pocket. Empty. It must be in there, in the center console. I took my key ring out because my house key digs into my thigh when I'm driving, so I took it out and said it. "Shut up." The man peered into the Navigator, saying, "You try to jump me from behind, I'll blow your intestines all over this lot. Understand?" The tattoo monster climbed up, leaned into the vehicle, and rustled around in the console. Abbott looked for bystanders. The church parking lot was empty, their position out of view by design. Some tourists passed on the sidewalk on the other side of the building, oblivious. He now wondered if Ether's brilliant choice of hidden parking hadn't doomed him. The man finished rummaging in the navigator, then turned and put the shotgun back in Abbott's face. "Motherfucker, you have made the grave mistake of judging me to be a patient man. Give it to me." "It's not in there? Then she must have taken it with her. I don't know why she would, but if it's not, then you and I are going to wait here for her." Just take the box," sputtered Abbott. "Isn't your car somewhere around here? Bring it around. I'll help you load it. I don't care. Just take it and go. Leave us alone." "Won't fit." "Then maybe we can—" "Shut the fuck up." He did. They stood there, silently, awkwardly, in the church parking lot. Some unseen children were giggling. Abbott wasn't sure if he wanted a passerby to stop and intervene, or if he was terrified that would happen. And what would the monster do when Ether got there? Would he kill her? Even if not, it was clear his goal was to take the navigator and everything in it, the money, their belongings, the gun, all of it, to do God knows what. But of course he would take everything. This is how it always went. Here was another bully who'd sensed that Abbott was on the verge of actually having some kind of good thing in his life, which could never be allowed. The monsters just took what they wanted, and they got away with it every time. From somewhere deep in the darkness of Abbott's gut, rage lit a match. He tried to puzzle out why Ether had taken the key fob in the first place, but of course it was so that he wouldn't do exactly what he'd been planning to do, which was take off and leave her stuff behind, with a note wishing her the best with the rest of her trip. Now, it was too late. It was too late for everything. Finally, Ether came bouncing around the corner of the church, looking freshly scrubbed, wearing her green sunglasses and welcome to the shit show cap. She ditched the neon orange visibility hoodie and had somehow acquired a turquoise alien-themed t-shirt, the front bearing the face of a gray, with the word abducted printed above. The tattoo monster crouched behind the front fender, the shotgun at the ready. He made eye contact with Abbott and put a finger to his lips, making it clear that Abbott was dead if he gave away his position prior to the ambush. Ether pointed to her shirt and said, "They're selling them on the sidewalk." She was energized and enthusiastic, renewed for the adventure. The tattoo monster stank of sweat and grease and coffee. Abbott looked back at Ether, then down at the man. Then he looked back up and yelled, "Run! He's here and he's got a gun!" Ether did exactly what Abbott was afraid she'd do, which was stop and stare in confusion. But of course what he was ordering her to do made no sense in her mind. Why would she run away from the navigator, and the box, and her whole reason for being here? Then the tattoo monster rose up with his shotgun, and only then did Ether turn and flee in the other direction. The monster pursued, and Abbott started to follow, then asked himself what the hell he intended to do if he caught up. In fact, what was he supposed to do in general? Some part of him knew, apparently, because he found himself yanking open the door of the navigator, diving into the back, and digging out his father's pistol from his bag. He chambered around. His father had insisted he learn how to do all this, and jumped back out to find Ether and the tattoo monster were now on the ground up by the church. He was straddling her and growling, "Give me the keys!" while rummaging in Ether's pants pockets as she thrashed to get away from him. Abbott was already running that direction, and when he got within about 10 feet, said, "Get away from her," in a voice so meek that it triggered a flush of embarrassment. He sounded like a child, like a weak, scared little boy. He tried again. "Hey, get off her!" The tattoo monster cast a brief glance backward, decided Abbott was not worth worrying about, then returned to the task at hand. He had his left hand jammed into Ether's other pocket now. His right was pressing her head into the pavement. She was making a piercing whimpering noise, like her head was about to burst like a melon. And then, for the first time in Abbott's entire life, he understood everything. This man, this woman, himself, and the gun. Abbott had learned early that when his father got angry at someone, the humanity of his target just evaporated from his mind. In that moment, they were an object, an obstacle unworthy of sympathy or empathy. Abbott had thought that his father was a psychopath for as long as he'd known the word, but now, finally, he got it. There is a primal override that shuts off all those feelings, because, in moments of maximum peril, they are a weakness that allows the predators and incompetence to do unchecked damage to the world. Abbott raised the gun, looked down the sights, and thought he would find some kind of resistance within himself, some invisible wall of fear or guilt that would push back, prevent him from stepping over this line. Instead, he found nothing at all. Abbott aimed the pistol right at the tattoo monster's bald fucking head and pulled the trigger. The gun barked and bucked, but Abbott didn't drop it. Not like he had the first day at the shooting range, which had caused his father to yell and yell and yell. Ether screamed. The tattoo monster threw himself off of her, flailing like a tossed dog toy. He then frantically checked his body with his hands for gunshot wounds. Finding none, he looked to Abbott and yelled, "Are you out of your goddamned mind?" Abbott stepped forward, trembling, clenching his teeth so hard that he felt the roots stabbing his gums. He pointed the gun right in the man's face and heard himself growl, "Oh, am I now speaking your fucking language?" Ether was standing now, brushing herself off, stunned by the turn of events. Her head was bleeding. She rushed over and quickly picked something off the ground. The shotgun the monster had apparently dropped at the end of their pursuit. She tried to catch her breath and said, "You're Malort, right? Sunday's friend?" "Just dump the box on the ground and drive away," grumbled the monster. "Otherwise, I'm gonna keep coming until either I get the box or you kill me. You're not making it to Sock, I can promise you that." Ether turned to Abbott. "Let's go." Abbott kept watching the bald man as he edged back toward the navigator. Ether kept the shotgun pointed at the guy even after she entered the passenger side, holding it out the window. To Abbott, she said, "Drive around into the other lot." Without asking why, he did, and found that parked near the road was the old red sedan. Ether jumped out, punctured all 4 of its tires with her Constitution knife, then hopped back into the navigator and said, Drive, turn left up here." That took them closer to the center of town, where some tourists were milling about, the festivities still in the setup phase. They arrived at an intersection next to a jeep full of girls in running gear. A banner over the street advertised tomorrow's abduction parade. A food stand nearby was selling Martian turds. Ether said, "Turn left." "Where are we going?" "Right now, toward people, witnesses, in case he comes back." "Should we go to the police?" "I don't know, Abbott. I don't know. I'm trying to think. He's tracking us. I don't know how." They turned and drove north, the touristy alien bullshit slowly becoming denser around them. They came to another intersection, and a group of pedestrians in alien garb crossed the street. A little farther up the road, traffic had crawled to a stop. "Jesus Christ," said Abbott. "Can we turn around? What's happening?" "I don't know. I think somebody might be directing traffic ahead. I don't like this." She checked behind them, a gesture that was becoming a tic at this point. There was an orange "Watch for Aliens" warning sign by the side of the road, and Abbott wasn't sure if it was actually warning of something or if it was just for whimsy. A guy on stilts, dressed like the monster from Predator, ambled across the street. Around his legs was a pair of laughing guys in gray masks. Traffic crept forward again, and, within a minute, stopped once more. Abbott was now scanning for an escape route, every moment imagining the tattoo monster running up to the driver's side, and Abbott having nowhere to go, his choices being smashing the car ahead of them or reversing into the one behind. "No," he grunted. "Fuck this." The only option was a U-turn. He backed up until the rear car honked at them, then awkwardly inched the navigator back and forth, doing a 10-point turn until he was able to run over the raised median and get going the other direction, only to instantly find out that after about 2 blocks, traffic that direction also wasn't going anywhere. Rage flared in his belly. He hated all these fucking people. Ether said, "Turn here, or we're going to get stuck again." She pointed to an entrance to an alley, one blocked by orange road closed sawhorse signs. Abbott used the grill to gently scoot the barriers aside. They passed through an alley narrow enough that there was barely enough room for his mirrors, Abbott bracing himself for the sound of scraping metal that would spell doom. Ether said, "You're turning right up here, then you'll—" But now someone was yelling from behind them, probably mad at them for disobeying the signs. Abbott stepped on the gas to get away from the yelling, away from being in big trouble. They reached the end of the alley, and Abbott looked left to make sure nobody was coming in his lane, then turned right, stepped on the gas, and now everyone was screaming at him. Both lanes were full of runners with numbers pinned to their bellies, some in alien costumes, some in running gear, everyone yelling and dodging out of the way. There was no place for him to go. So he kept driving, the runners scattering around him, someone getting mad enough to slap the door panel as they passed. The sidewalks were lined with spectators, and they also were shouting now, taking video with their phones. Abbott's face flushed, and this was about twice as distressing as the gunfight with the monster 10 minutes ago. "What's happening? Who are these people?" "We're in a marathon!" yelled Ether. "Go! Turn up here! Get off this street!" But of course, every side street was barricaded to prevent this very thing from happening, so Abbott just kept driving, and eventually passed under a banner that stretched across the road that said, "Alien Chase 5K Walk/Run." And then that road ended with a row of closed signs, and he had nowhere to go. "Cut across here!" shouted Ether, and Abbott obeyed without debate or consideration. He found himself crossing a lawn of sparsely packed, shouting, enraged spectators. He knocked over a charcoal grill. He crushed a cooler. Then they made it onto a street, and a couple of turns later seemed to be free of the madness. Abbott thought he could hear sirens, and suddenly remembered that they were in possession of 2 different firearms that did not belong to them, 2 bags packed with probably illicit rolls of cash, and whatever the fuck was in that goddamned black box. Ether was studying the map and saying, "Turn here," and "Cut across here," like she had experience evading police and had some idea of where they would look. Eventually, they hit a highway, and Abbott drove away too fast, trying to put the unholy nightmare of Roswell behind them. Abbott wiped sweat from his eyes. Jesus Christ. Jesus fucking Christ. "I don't see him back there." "That means nothing. He's coming." "It's broad daylight, with a lot of people around. It'll be tough for him to steal a car, and it'd take hours to get 4 new tires for his. If we took his only gun, he'll try to get another one before coming after us again. No, I think he'll be a full day behind us if we keep moving, whether he's tracking us or not." "You're bleeding." Ether's hand and ear were scraped raw from where the tattoo monster had used the pavement as a weapon. She lost her trucker cap in the altercation. She dug into her bag and found a t-shirt to use as a bandage. She said, "We just need to think. He never had a chance to put a tracker on this vehicle, right? If he got close enough to do it when we'd stopped somewhere, why wouldn't he have just taken the box then, or disabled the engine? Same with the box itself. The tracker would have to be inside. How would he have gotten it in there?" "Who else would have access to the box?" "Just Phil, the guy who was storing it before I picked it up. But he was a zealot when it came to being tracked. He wouldn't have even owned a phone if his daughter hadn't—" "Oh my God." She covered her face with her bloody hands. "His daughter did it. She probably put an air tag in there and didn't tell him." "That just now occurred to you?" "I mean, to work, the monster would still need access to the owner's phone. I threw it away." "Like, into the ocean?" "No, I just threw it in the trash. He couldn't have found it. Or maybe, I don't know. I just thought that you throw something away and it disappears forever. So what do? We can't open the box." "We have to block the signal. Aluminum foil will do it. We'll stop and get some. Wrap the whole box." You mean we have to literally make our black box a tinfoil hat to wear? Basically, yeah. Okay, good. We'll do that as soon as possible. Abbott gripped the wheel. Staring daggers into the windshield, he said, "He's after both of us now, because I shot at him." "You sure did. You came for me." "What else was I gonna do? You had my keys." "You could have let him have me, grabbed the cash, jumped in a cab to the nearest airport, flown back to LA, and enjoyed your riches. You made a choice. You risked your life. Take a moment to stop and appreciate that about yourself." "He's going to kill me." No. We're going to block his tracker, change our route, and put hundreds of miles between us and him. We're smarter than he is. There's two of us. We have guns and big bags of cash. We're goddamned Bonnie and Clyde, tearing ass across America. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Abbott said, "I do have to stop and piss, though." "Yeah, me too." And then Ether started giggling, and Abbott joined in. And soon, they were both laughing so hard they could barely breathe. Abbott Coburn just attempted a parade ramming attack in Roswell, New Mexico. The vehicle has fled the scene. Posted to r/Abaddon's Navigator by Truth Lover 420. And yes, Abbott stands. He was driving, not GSG. So let's put to bed any theory that he's a hostage or a dupe. He is literally and figuratively at the wheel of this operation. She didn't hire him as a driver. The Circle K is just where they arranged to meet. I'll say it until y'all finally start to listen. At this point, even if the woman was arrested or killed, Abbott would continue the mission without her. I believe this attack was a dry run to measure police response time. They may be looking for a similar target in DC for the final attack. Judging from Abbott's previous videos, I would look for any parades or other gatherings of women/feminists in the DC area. Abbott Coburn is an incel terrorist, and at this point, anyone who disagrees should also be labeled as such. Post deleted by moderator Zeke Art. The following is a partial transcript from a Twitch stream posted approximately 3 years ago by user Abaddon6969 at 3:41 a.m. on a Tuesday. Is Harvey Weinstein going on trial yet again? That whole thing is so stupid. Everybody has lost their minds. Huge Hollywood producer, won tons of Oscars, then suddenly all these actresses come out of the woodwork saying he sexually harassed them? Hilarious. Abbott glances off to the side, where messages from viewers appear in a chat window, verbally replying to what he is reading. Oh, cry me a river. These women weren't starving. They weren't exchanging sex for food. They were incredibly privileged people angling for literally the most prestigious job on the planet. Hell, in the history of the planet. If this goblin offered sex for a chance to be a star, all they had to do was say no. Go work a regular job like the rest of us. But they made that deal, and that's what creates the system that these women find so oppressive. Abbott reads the chat window again. What do you mean, power imbalance? God, we treat women like babies. These are adults. They have agency. Beautiful white women are literally the most privileged group in the history of the species. They can walk into a room with billionaires and royalty and have them eating out of their hands. But these women wanted more. They wanted wealth, fame, mass adoration, the absolute best of the best of everything, all the time. So this ugly, gross dude, Harvey, he says, "Hey, in any other circumstance you would treat me like dog shit, but I happen to have a powerful position where I can get you access to the best possible life of any time or place in the known universe. Do you want to play ball?" He didn't put a gun to their heads, so they give him what he wants. He gives them what they want. They get incredibly rich and famous. Then 20 years later, they get to play the trauma card and cash in again. Wouldn't that be amazing? To have the most privilege anyone has ever had and get to play victim at the same time. Living life as a pretty white girl isn't just playing the game on easy mode, it's playing it in God mode. You're not even playing the same game as the rest of us. Abbott reads more chat responses, his demeanor seeming to change for the worse. No, I say he was the one being sexually harassed. Women hate it when men treat them differently because they want sex, but when women hold out the possibility of sex to extract things from men, favors, compliments, jobs, that's how women sexually harass men. Don't get me wrong, women sexually harass men the traditional way too, but mostly it's the one girl in a programming class asking for help and instantly having 15 nerds rush over to do her work for her. Why does she think they're doing that? It's her using her power over them, the same as Harvey did with those actresses. Every time a girl pokes at a guy's sexual desire, his insecurity, that's sexual harassment. It should get you fired and ostracized just the same. Abbott reads more chat responses. If he legitimately assaulted someone, like violently forced them, that's different. But that's already a crime. If he did that, he should be arrested and charged like anyone else. But that's not what this movement is about. The people demanding change aren't asking for more cops to bust violent rapists. They want to abolish the police. Look, this is how it is. If you're rich, you're going to be the target of crime because you have something other people want. You have money. They don't. That's part of the downside of being rich. Well, if you're rich in looks and sex appeal, it's the same thing. You have what every man wants. Yes, ladies, men are going to try to put their hands on you. That's the trade-off. You're walking around in a starving country with a body made of cupcakes. You can't change that by turning it into a witch hunt where all it takes is one anonymous accusation to destroy the starving man's life. Abbott reads the chat, seems to become visibly agitated. What's ironic? Using the term witch hunt? Oh, great. We've got a feminist here. Maybe go read the history of witch hunts. You know who the accusers were in the Salem witch trials? It wasn't the patriarchy. It wasn't the mean old white Christians. It was a group of white teenage girls. Look it up. See, that's the real witchcraft. That's the real mind control. If a pretty white girl cries, men will burn the world to the ground on her behalf. And the girls all know it. They know we have these protector instincts, that we're desperate for their approval. And they manipulate that at every opportunity. They always have. Abbott continues to read chat responses, angrily shifts in his chair. Fuck off. Stop responding to her, guys. I banned her. It's probably the first time anybody has dared disagree with her. There is no privilege in the universe like female physical attractiveness. Not money, not power, not race. Physical attractiveness utterly dominates all social interaction at every level. To see them complain about being marginalized is so ridiculous that it's grotesque. Alright, enough of that. So today, we've got the new chicken sandwich from Jack in the Box. This one has pickles and extra mystery sauce. Chapter 10. Abbott. They found a dusty huddle of businesses along the highway and pulled into a Family Dollar that was sandwiched between Tiny's Burger Barn and a weed dispensary. They bought 2 rolls of foil and quickly and clumsily wrapped the black box in multiple layers. Abbott couldn't pretend to be an expert on Apple's tracking tech, but this was just physics. No electromagnetic signal was penetrating metal. If the tattoo monster was still tracking the box, the little dot on his map would have just disappeared. They had then quickly jumped back into the Navigator, and Ether directed Abbott onto a series of country roads so that their pursuer couldn't simply extrapolate their route from their last known location. They wound up on a gravel road at some point, accidentally turned off onto a driveway to a farmhouse, got totally lost, and then, by pure luck, stumbled onto a neglected 4-lane highway with signs pointing them toward Lubbock. Ether sat back and examined the mangled knuckles in her hand under the blood-stained shirt bandage. Okay, help me think. Is there any other way he can track us? Let's assume he has maximum tracking powers, access to a network of cyberpunk biker hackers, everything. I don't know, said Abbott, who, the previous night, had fully believed he'd be on his way home by now. I mean, this is what an adventure is, just overcoming obstacles. We had a problem. A crazy guy wanted to steal our shipment, and we solved it. We lost him. For real, this time. She examined her scraped ear in the mirror. There was also a pink mark at the top of her forehead, but she paid it no special attention, and Abbott thought maybe that one had already been there. He muttered,
I can't stop my left hand from shaking.
That's understandable, but you have to rev down at some point. Your nervous system can't stay amped up forever. You'll burn out. We were in danger. We dealt with it. Now the danger has passed. She took in and let out a long breath. Now we just settle in and drive. Just relax.
I don't think I've relaxed once in my whole life.
Well, maybe it's time to try something new. If you allow yourself to feel the distress of the conflict, you should also allow yourself to feel the release of victory.
Remember how you said we all need silence now and then, so we finally have a chance to process our thoughts? That's what I need from you right now. Silence.
Got it.
Key.
Phil Green's place was surrounded by a tall, corrugated metal fence topped with barbed wire. She had driven past a few times to confirm nobody was staking out the property, and she was now watching it from down the road, waiting for anyone to come by. The navigator obsessives on the internet hadn't yet connected that vehicle to this property, but when they did, macabre tourists would surely be showing up to get a look. The subreddit now boasted tens of thousands of followers, and speculation had spread to every platform, with true crime TikTok influencers sticking their faces into the camera and boldly asserting that they knew exactly what was inside that mysterious armored box/footlocker/steamer trunk. Key watched, ate the tragic lunch she'd packed for herself, and finally decided that nobody else was coming. She headed down a road that curved around a hill to find the burned-out shack. What little remained of the structure hadn't been roped off as a crime scene, because, well, there really wasn't much to rope off. The walls had tumbled over at some point, the whole structure now just a tossed salad of boards and charcoal. She found the hatch, which hadn't been nailed shut or otherwise locked. She opened it, shined a flashlight down, and saw a ladder ending at what appeared to be a fairly spacious tunnel. Surely if she went down and followed it, she would find nothing but an impassable locked door at the other end, one probably connected to an alarm she wouldn't want to trip. But, there was only one way to find out. She had decided before leaving her apartment that she was now functioning as a journalist. You didn't have to get some special license to be one. You could just claim the title as long as you intended to publish your findings, which she would, probably, if she discovered the truth and didn't die in the process. Thus, it was in her capacity as a journalist that she climbed down and found the tunnel was constructed from an arch of corrugated metal that seemed to be buckling in places, as if it could cave in at any moment. Ahead was a steel door, standing wide open. She moved that direction, and then, from behind her, a stern voice said, "That is a very bad idea." Abbott. "I didn't say I hated all 80s movies," said Abbott, as he browsed a row of jalapeno and cheese hot dogs rotating in a warmer. "I said I hate movies like the ones you keep talking about, where the heroes are nerds and outcasts, but then there's a group of like 7 of them. If you have 7 friends you can play D&D with, you're not an outcast." "But I'm saying, when you watch movies from back then, you see those groups of kids get on their bicycles and go on adventures around the neighborhood. They walked around and showed up at each other's houses. In real life. You don't watch that and envy it a little?" "The suburb I grew up in didn't even have sidewalks. You either walked on the shoulder with cars zipping by inches away, or you were wading through a drainage ditch." "Yes, exactly. For the last 40 years, everything has been built around getting into a car, going to an appointed place at an appointed time, and driving back. There's no chance for adventure, to run into new friends, new situations. It's all planned, supervised." They were wandering around a 7-Eleven store in a sparse city that Abbott thought was Lubbock, Texas, unless Lubbock was the next one, and they were in some equally desolate expanse of pavement. Abbott had decided early in the trip that it would be a tight contest to decide which U.S. state was the emptiest, but Texas was making a strong case. It wasn't just the vast expanses of perfectly flat nothing along the highway. It's that even within the towns, The structures were scattered, as if they'd all been slid across a smooth floor. There were wide stretches of pavement and/or dying grass in between buildings, as if they couldn't stand to be too close to one another. This particular gas station was at a busy intersection across from a sports stadium of some kind, surrounded by hotels that stood like islands in a sun-baked ocean of parking. Abbott and Ether were looking for something they could eat for lunch on the move, food that wouldn't drip onto the navigator's precious, immaculate leather seats. "When I was a kid," said Abbott, "my dad wouldn't let me walk anywhere by myself, because he was convinced I'd get snatched up by child molesters. He had all these examples in his head, stuff he heard on the news. Did you know that 3 little kids were abducted in Memphis and had their penises cut off by Satan worshippers? And then you get blamed for wanting to stay inside when you grow up," added Ether. "That stranger danger paranoia came from the suburbs. Parents in perfect neighborhoods terrified that child trafficking rings would steal their kid if they let them out of their sight for 10 seconds. I would say, imagine what that does to a child growing up. But I don't have to imagine. Between the two of us, we have like 6 amber bottles of brain meds and 0 coping skills. Now those same boomers are like, why don't you go outside? Why are you looking at your screens all the time? These are the same people who started this trend of never letting kids go out on their own because their screens told them the streets were full of monsters. So you grew up in Florida? You mentioned that earlier." Ether had been doing this since Roswell, trying to strike up conversation, to reset the vibe to fine and normal. At one point, she'd asked him if he had another job, and he deflected, as was his habit. There was no non-awkward way to explain his Twitch channel to outsiders, and he loathed the way people always got embarrassed on his behalf. "My parents had me by accident." "Oh, same," he said, his childhood trauma actually being one of his most frequent and comfortable conversation topics. "They hated each other. My dad married my mom after she got pregnant, out of obligation. I guess he was old-fashioned or something. They continued hating each other, and both hated me for being the thing that was keeping them stuck together. Eventually, Mom went on a business trip to Houston and just never came back. She hated Dad, but she just didn't like me. She wasn't shy about it." "I'm sure it wasn't that bad." He shrugged. "She didn't want to be a mother. If I'd been some kind of child she enjoyed being around, maybe she'd have warmed to the situation. But I was annoying. I wasn't any fun. Always whining, needy, ugly. No cool talents to brag to her friends about. Do you think this hot dog will drip on the seats?" "Not if you leave off the mustard. What about your dad?" "I think it has cheese or something inside it. Seems like it'll squirt out the other end when I bite into it." He scanned around for some drier food, then said, "If my dad could return me like a defective piece of merchandise, he would." "Come on, that can't be true. Do you see any hats? I need a new one. Mine fell off in Roswell." "He's been angry since I was born, and where normal people get mad and then get over it, Dad just keeps cycling higher, like a runaway reactor. Like, he'll get mad. Then he'll get mad about the fact that you made him mad, and the only thing that will calm him down is if he can spread it, make everyone else miserable. He sees the universe as this machine that is designed to give him everything, and he takes it as a personal affront when it misfires. I had an old boyfriend like that. Actually, more than one. Dad joined the Marines out of high school because his parents were scared of what he'd do otherwise. He told me that himself, bragging about it, about how dangerous he was. Do you like your parents?" She didn't answer. Abbott said, "Come on, you're prying to be constantly but can't share basic surface information, like whether or not you hate your dad?" "Later, let's go. This is too long for me to be in one spot hatless." They went back out into the heat, and Abbott surveyed the paved landscape. If aliens landed, they'd think only cars lived here. "Well, we're in the dead zone right now," replied Ether. This is actually one of the most populated spots.
What do you mean, dead zone?
There's a dead strip right up the middle of the USA. It's weird. You have a vertical row of cities, Dallas, OKC, Kansas City, Minneapolis, and to the west of it is this blank strip hundreds of miles wide where almost nobody lives. I'm talking whole counties with fewer than one person per square mile. The trip gets more interesting once you get through this. 80% of the U.S. population lives to the east of the dead zone. And of course, north of us, you have the Oklahoma Panhandle, that strip of land that used to be part of Texas, but when Texas entered the Union, they wanted to be a slave state. But slavery wasn't allowed north of that parallel, so they just lopped off that strip, and for decades, it didn't belong to anybody. For years, they didn't even have laws there. It was like the purge.
Abbott wasn't listening. He'd opened the driver's side door and was now staring, frozen. Blood. Dried to the color of rust, smeared all over the off-white leather of the passenger seat. It had been there for hours, but he hadn't noticed when it had been hidden under Ether's ass. How did this get here? What the fuck? Ether came around, alarmed by his tone, then only seemed confused.
Oh, I bet it's from my hand. I didn't even notice.
Without a word, Abbott rushed back into the 7-Eleven, scanning the tiny household goods shelf for some kind of cleaning products. His breath was getting short. His hand was shaking again. Ether had come in behind him at some point and was saying something about plain soap and water being the best cleaner, that they could get it from the restrooms. Abbott dashed off, found a men's room, and quickly soaked a wad of paper towels in water and hand soap. He rushed back out to the Navigator, wiping down the stains, scrubbing them, accomplishing nothing. Smears of rusty crimson had soaked into the leather. Ether was watching him scrub and curse and said,
"Abbott, we can have it cleaned after the trip."
She didn't get it. 30 hours together, and she still didn't get it. She didn't get anything. My life is over, he breathed, leaning into the car, staring down at the tainted seat. My life is over. My life is over. He closed his eyes.
Because of the stains?
Asked Ether stupidly.
Abbott, I don't understand.
I can't go back now. Don't you see that? If I'd wanted to go back at any point before now, I had that option. I could have turned around, shown up back at home with some chunk of the cash, and told my dad the job was all done. The little scratches on the front end, whatever. That's the result of running the vehicle hard, doing work. We'd have forgotten all about that in a month. Everything would be back the way it was before. I had that option, to make things the way they were. But if I go back and the car looks like this, he's put 30,000 miles on it without a single speck on the interior. It was sterile. You could build microprocessors in here. And it took me 1 day to ruin the seats. I can't take it back to him like this. Do you understand? I can't. No matter what.
Okay.
I can't go back to my old life. It's done. It's irrevocable. I almost killed a man. And now, even if we make the delivery, this guy can find where I live. He's seen me. He's seen the license plates. I'm dead.
You're catastrophizing again. Breathe.
Tell me what part of that was wrong.
Listen, what I'm about to say, I know I'm going to sound like a bumper sticker, but this is just me telling you the situation. Okay? So, all your life, you've been cleaning to the side of a swimming pool. On the opposite side of that pool is everything you want. Independence, respect, your own career and a home, and maybe a partner. But to get to the other side of the pool, you have to let go of the side you're on. That light-headed feeling you're experiencing right now, part of it is just that. You're floating free, like a grown-up. Your own actions, your own consequences. Sink or swim.
This is not a fucking swimming pool. A pool is a controlled environment. This is an ocean with storms and sharks.
Trust me, I know. I didn't want to alarm you with the wrong analogy.
You trapped me into this. This is exactly what you wanted to happen, for me to have no choice. You ruined my life just so I would have nothing to go back to.
Ether kept her voice steady, infuriatingly so. Abbott,
Listen to me. Out here in the adult world, we make decisions and we stick by them. We take responsibility for them. You hate that the world treats you like a loser. Well, here's your chance to prove them wrong. Don't tell me to... Do you need help? Interrupted a voice from behind them. They both turned to find a smiling young woman who Abbott decided had the exact wrong kind of face to be turning up at a time like this. Abbott said, "No." Ether said, "No. Thank you, though." The girl didn't leave, because of course she didn't. Okay. I saw you were in there, and I wasn't going to say anything. My husband was like, leave them alone, but it sounded like you were having trouble, and I thought I'd come see." A burst of rage flashed through Abbott's system. The girl was talking and saying nothing, a thing that almost all girls did, and that he never understood. Why wasn't she leaving? "We've got it," said Ether, forced to repeat the exact same information she just conveyed. Abbott detected something in her voice. If not irritation, then a little bit of fear. "Is that blood?" asked this cursed goblin of a woman. "Oh, your hand! And your car! We have a first aid kit in the trailer if you need it." The girl gestured toward a pickup truck with dual-wheel tires towing a trailer that contained at least one mildly confused horse. A fat guy with a goatee in the middle of his face sat behind the wheel. He smiled and shouted, and said 4 words that threw Abbott for a loop. "She's a big fan!" The goblin girl put a hand over her eye in a show of embarrassment, then said, "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I wasn't even going to say anything." Abbott scrambled to imagine which of his regular fans could be this Texas horse girl in too much makeup when she looked at Ether and said, "It's true, though. You totally changed my life." Ether was frozen now. Abbott could see a fight-or-flight response that, in this scenario, translated to lie or dive into the navigator. "Oh," she replied, eyes wide. "Yes, thank you." "I was in a really dark place," said the goblin, "with body image issues and everything else, but you really kept me going. I watched your videos every day, over and over. It was like you were the only one who understood. Since then, I've gone back and finished my degree, got married. We have a baby on the way." She stopped to wipe away a tear, and Abbott was still enraged, but wasn't totally sure who to be angry at. Maybe everyone. The goblin, Ether, himself, that guy on the truck with his tiny goatee. Fuck him and the horse that rode in on him. Ether said, "Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. We do have to hurry off. I don't want to be rude. I got scraped up falling out of the car, and we're going to go get it checked out." "Oh, of course. I'm so sorry. I won't hold you up." She then turned toward Abbott and said, "And you are?" Abbott scrambled to think of a fake name. At the exact same time, his mouth went ahead and said, "Abbott." "Good to meet you," she said, clearly trying to discern the relationship between Abbott and Ether, who was apparently this girl's idol for some reason. "I hate to even ask this," she said to Ether, clearly not hating it enough, "but can I get a selfie with you?" Ether again went into panic mode, actually looking to Abbott for help, having no idea how to refuse this request. Abbott understood her dilemma. If she took the picture, there was now documentation of their location, presumably to be promptly shared with the world. If she refused, the crestfallen girl would take to the internet to complain that Ether had snubbed her, which would also no doubt peg their location. They were screwed either way. Ether quickly smiled and shuffled into selfie position while saying, "I have one condition, though. Don't post it, okay?" "Oh, sure. It'll just be for me." They took the pic, and the girl smiled at her phone as she examined the results. "You look so beautiful, though. I love the short hair."
She hugged Ether without asking permission, and again wiped tears from her eyes as she sauntered away. Abbott glared at Ether and hissed, "What the fuck was that?" "We have to go. Now,"